Diane, we're set?
Yeah, we're good. We're good.
Okay. All right, says recording. Okay.
Good afternoon. Welcome to this monthly meeting of the Rehoboth Beach Planning Commission. Could we please have a roll call vote? Roll call, please.
And in the absence of the secretary, I will do that. Commissioner Strange,
Here.
Commissioner Ellison,
Here.
Commissioner Hunter,
Here.
Commissioner Dewey is out. Commissioner Toby,
Here.
Commissioner Stockdale,
Here.
Commissioner Davis. Here. And myself, Susan Gay, is here. Chair Bryan.
Here. We have a quorum. Call this meeting to order. The first matter on the agenda is the election of officers, and I'll ask our counsel to handle that matter, please.
Yes, Mr. Chair. We have elections for 3 officer positions, secretary, vice chair, and chair. We've received nominations, starting with chair. The only nomination is for Mike Bryan. Are there any other nominations? Seeing none, nominations are closed. I'd entertain a motion for Mike Bryan to continue as chair of the Planning Commission.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, Mr. Chair, you may continue. You have failed at finding a successor. The next election is for vice chair. The only nomination thus far is for Susan Gay. Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, I'll close the nominations and seek a motion to approve Susan Gay as vice chair.
So moved. Good.
Having moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Finally, for secretary, John Dewey has been nominated. Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, I'll close the nominations. Is there a motion for John Dewey to be elected secretary?
So moved.
Been duly moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. So your new officers are your old officers.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Okay.
The next matter is that I would like as chair just to exercise a prerogative to change the order of
Verification
events.
Meeting notice first.
Well, yeah, I guess we could.
Yeah.
Ms. Womack, would you please verify the notice to the meeting?
The agenda for the planning commission regular meeting was posted in City Hall and on the city portal on October 15th. The agenda was amended and reposted on October 21st and 22nd. The public notice for continuation of preliminary review of new subdivision application number 1024-14, Oceanside Reserve, for the property located at 20699 Coastal Highway, was posted in City Hall and on the city portal on September 30th. The public notice was published in the Cape Gazette on October 7th and October 10th, and in the Delaware State News on October 3rd and October 8th. Notifications specific to this project were mailed out to property owners in the city limits within 200 feet of the subject property, and signage was posted on the property. The public notice for public hearing of site plan review application number 0725-02, Public Library, for the property located at 226 Rehoboth Avenue, was posted in City Hall and on the city portal on September 30th. The public notice was published in the Cape Gazette on October 7th and October 10th, and in the Delaware State News on October 3rd and October 8th. Notifications specific to this project were mailed out to property owners within 200 feet of the subject property, and signage was posted on the property. Public notice for minor amendment of site plan review application number 0523-04, One Rehoboth Hotel, for the property located at One Rehoboth Avenue, was posted in City Hall and on the city portal on September 30th. The public notice was published in the Cape Gazette on October 7th and October 10th, and in the Delaware State News on October 3rd and October 8th. Notifications specific to this project were mailed out to property owners within 200 feet of the subject property, and signage was posted on the property. That's all I have.
Thank you. Like to switch the order of our three matters today and move to the first, the consideration of the public library matter at 226 Rehoboth Avenue. Second would then be the Ocean Reserve subdivision, and the third would be One Rehoboth. Is there anyone here to present for the library? Yes, sir. Please come forward.
Good afternoon. My name is John Falkowski. I'm a civil engineer for Becker Morgan Group here on behalf of the library. So I will use Corey's link here. We were here a month ago and presented this plan before you. This is for a 632 square foot addition to the Rehoboth Public Library. It's been through engineering review, planning review, and we have achieved and obtained all of our agency approvals at this point. They're part of the packet. The last one trickling in was a site fire marshal approval that we just received. So I didn't think it made it into the packet, but you do have that for the records. So since last time we were here, the only update really to the plan is the bottom parking you see here. To the rear of the building, there were 10 spaces. The ADA spot was not necessarily ADA compliant. So they've agreed to refinish and restripe that back area so that it is in fact ADA compliant. A couple other.
Has that been done?
It's been added to the plans, but the work hasn't been done yet, obviously. In addition, it's part of the packet, we did receive a letter from the Summer House confirming that the 2 parking spaces would go back to the library, meeting the 12 parking space requirement for the site plan. The signs actually have already been taken down, and then that letter was submitted for record. So we meet that parking requirement. And then just a couple other clarification items. We did submit for the record the DelDOT confirmation of the site meeting we had right in front of the library, just confirming that we were able to open cut the road to install that water main, and they were okay with the plans to do that. So
you've gotten all your outside agency reviews done,
we have, yes.
and none are objectionable, none are problematic?
No.
Okay.
So with that, just happy to take any questions.
Any members of the commission?
Last month, we're satisfied this time.
You do understand that the 2 parking space issues, the completion of the restriping is required as part of this, the decision of the planning commission today?
Yes.
You said it's already on the plans, right?
Yes, it was updated. You can see.
Okay, so it's purple. Okay.
All
There you
right.
go, zoom in there. So these 2 spaces here were where a propane tank and some curbing was going to be removed, and then they would rehab those spots, and those 2 spots shown there on the left of the screen, those are the 2 additional.
All right, sir. Is anyone from the public here in support of or opposed to this matter? If so, please come forward, state your name. Yes, sir. Please come to the microphone.
Thank you. I'm on the
Turn it on.
board of directors of the Friends of the Public Library.
Corey, can you turn that mic on, please? Thank you.
Could you state your name again, please?
Sure, Neil Pollock, Pollock. And I'm on the board of directors of the Friends of the Library.
Yes, sir.
And I'm also the liaison from the Friends to the trustees of the library.
Yes, sir.
And I'm here to support. We've been through lots of meetings planning all this stuff, and I'm here to support it. I know what else I can add to it, but we're really looking forward to these renovations, and the libraries, at least according to the drawings we have, is going to be fantastic.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, seeing none, I'll close the public comment section. Members of the commission, do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion. I move to approve the site plan review application number 0725-02 for the Rehoboth Beach Public Library, subject to the following conditions. 1, prior to the issuance of any building permit for the proposed project, applicant shall obtain all necessary permits and approvals for the project under applicable federal, state, and city laws and regulations. 2, there shall be no additional or increased encroachments on either public right-of-way or private property beyond existing conditions. And number 3, applicant shall submit for approval from DelDOT and the Rehoboth Beach Public Works any proposed changes to replace water or telecommunications services.
You've heard the motion. Is there a second? Second. Second. We have a second? Any discussion?
To do a roll call vote?
Please.
Commissioner Strange?
I vote yes.
Commissioner Ellison?
I vote yes. I think this is a wonderful plan. Thank you.
Yes. Commissioner Hunter?
I also vote yes. I'm very happy to support the plans for the library to expand, and it seems to me this is an excellent plan.
Commissioner Toby?
I vote yes.
Commissioner Stockdale?
I too vote yes. I think it's a good plan, and I think the plan satisfies all applicable code requirements.
Commissioner Davis?
I vote yes. I think the plan not only meets all the code requirements, but the addition to the library is a very nice amenity for the residents of the beach, and I'm very happy to see it.
And I vote aye for all the reasons stated by my colleagues. Chair?
Chair votes aye, and note that this matter is fully code compliant. That is quite important to the work that we do, and we thank you for that and wish you the best.
Well, thank you. We look forward to getting started. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next matter on the agenda is the continuation of preliminary review of major subdivision application number 1024-14 Oceanside Reserve, a major subdivision property located in the C1 Commercial District. It totals 357,034 square feet, or 7.74 acres, and they want to subdivide it into, the application is to subdivide into 33 new lots. Who's here to present this matter? Mr. Hutt?
Good afternoon. For the record, my name is David Hutt, a local attorney here in Sussex County with the law firm of Morris James. This afternoon, I am representing the applicant, Cape Communities LLC. They are also the contract purchaser of the property, seeking to undertake the subdivision of the property that you see on the screens around the room right now. With me this afternoon to assist as may be necessary are Joe Reed and Brent Reed. They're sitting about 3 rows back. They are principals with Cape Communities LLC, who I just introduced. Sitting along the wall here is Mark Davidson, a vice president and principal land planner with the Pannoni Group. Sitting right behind the Reeds is Eric Wall, a senior landscape designer, also with the Pannoni Group. And then sitting next to him is Curtis Eaton, a professional engineer with the Pannoni Group. Before going too much further, I did want to note that today is the 1-year anniversary of the initial filing of this application with Mr. Schenko and his office. I think it's happenstance that this meeting is on that same anniversary date. As referenced, I know that Mr. Schenko has submitted a letter to the Planning Commission, and as is referenced in that, and as you likely recall, in June, there was, excuse me, the Planning Commission began the preliminary review that is being continued here this afternoon. Since that June 26th meeting, there has been a lot of activity. Much of it involved Mr. Schenko, various parts of the city, Public Works. In addition to that, of course, the Pannoni Group has been busy working on adjustments to the plans. In addition to that, and this was part of the package of materials that was submitted last month as part of that supplementary package, there was a number of comment letters. Secretary Dewey, who's not with us, I'm pointing to where he would be sitting if he were here. Secretary Dewey had a letter, sort of a line-by-line review. Chairman Bryan, you had a letter summarizing comments. Mr. Schenko had a letter. Beacon Engineering had a comment letter. So all those comment letters within that supplemental package of materials, there are responses to each of the various items that were set forth in those. And I certainly don't intend to review that this afternoon to the relief of everyone who's sitting out here listening. As you can see, and as it was introduced, there have been revisions to the plan since that June 26th meeting that took into account all of the various comment letters and such. And I wanted to focus on three primary revisions to that plan. First, and the next slide, is the plan that was shown to the Planning Commission in June 26, 2025. And while they're very similar, the first change that I wanted to reference was the elimination of the alley that would be along the lots that are on Scarborough Avenue Extended. And as you may recall from that discussion, there were several concerns raised by Mr. Schenko, also various members of the Planning Commission regarding the use of that alley and discussion about whether or not it created double frontage lots and a number of concerns that sprung from that. In reworking the plan to eliminate the alley, that led to the second change. What you see on the screens has 31 lots. Going back to the plan with the elimination of the alley, there are now 33 lots that are shown on the plan. And essentially that cul-de-sac area that you can see along the lots that front on Scarborough Avenue at the top of the screen or north, that is where those two additional lots were created. One thing I wanted to start and note just at the very outset is even with the addition of those two lots, the average lot size is still nearly 8,000 feet, specifically at 7,923 square feet. So even though there are now two lots that weren't there in June, the lots are still oversized lots for the city of Rehoboth Beach minimum size requirement of 5,000 square feet. The other change that is significant, and I'll get into this in a little more detail in a moment, but the entry road in from Route 1 and then the main road was changed so that it has, first of all, that it meets the city's collector street standards. There was discussion about that in June. In addition to that, you can see now it's a boulevard-style street with travel lanes on either side of a landscaped median. And that's similar, and so the city is familiar with that. Scarborough Avenue has a similar condition to what that look and feel will be like with the travel lanes being separated by the median. And as you likely recall, in June, the road, which did not have the right-of-way to be a collector street, that was changed, of course, to meet the minimum requirements for the collector street. And then, of course, the additional area in the middle is used as a median. And as I'll get to in a moment, that actually serves more functions and purpose than just being aesthetically pleasing and creating that boulevard look and feel. At a very quick level, just to quick refresher, since it's been several months, this is a 7.71 acre site. It is 33 lots in this plan, and I would note that there are probably not very many 33 lot subdivisions that have a traffic signal at their entrance. And of course, that is because of what used to be there. And last time we talked about all the various uses that have occurred there over time, beginning with the A&P and going up to more modern uses, including Emerald Auction and the All Saints Thrift Shop. Without reviewing all those, again, just quickly orienting everyone, although I know people are probably already oriented at the top, and I've mentioned it, are lots that front on Scarborough Avenue Extended. On the right side of the screen, as you're looking at it, are lots that are in Silver Lake Shores, which of course is off of Silver Lane. And then the bottom or south side of the property is of course the municipal limit for the city of Rehoboth Beach. The properties that are on the opposite side of that front on Terrace Road, and those properties are in Sussex County and not within the city of Rehoboth Beach. The zoning classification of the property is the city's C1 Central Commercial District, and as we reviewed again last time, this is in a Level 1 area on the state strategies map, and the city's 2020 CDP shows the property as matching its C1 zoning as being a commercial area. As was indicated last time, this is the plan that it was known as the Beach Walk property, which had 63 units, 58 detached single-family homes, and 5 townhome units. And of course, as that project took some time, the conditions at the site continued to deteriorate. And presently, and I know there's a number of letters that talk about this that the commission has received, but I think most of the residents in Rehoboth and the Dewey area are looking forward to there being something there other than the rundown commercial buildings that exist, as well as all the paving and parking that exists at the site. As you likely recall, in addition to the benefits of any redevelopment that, of course, always refurbishes a property as things are brought new and to current standards, in the existing conditions, and you can see all of the gray and brown that is on this plan, those are, of course, the impervious area currently at that Ocean Bay Mart site constitute 87% of the entirety of the property, with only 13% or a little less than an acre being pervious area. Assuming that each of those lots met the 50% maximum lot coverage requirement under the prior plan when we were here in June, the pervious area went from 13% to 40%. That actually increases even further with the plan that you have in front of you this afternoon. In that plan, the proposed pervious area is now more than 144,000 square feet compared to the 42,000 square feet that presently exists. So the increase in the pervious area by square footage is a 343% increase. And comparing it to that 13% number is a 43% increase in the pervious area that exists. Comparing the current condition, this is an aerial overlay that takes the current condition. You can see the commercial buildings and parking areas with the proposed subdivision laid on top of it. There's no doubt that this will be a drastic difference for the city from what currently exists at the site to what is proposed as the project moves forward, hopefully with shortly and in this process that it's undertaking right now. Within the packet of materials that was submitted as part of that supplementary package, as I mentioned at the outset, I want to just highlight a couple of items that we discussed in June and that have been updated since that June preliminary hearing, one of which is the entrance into the community. As I mentioned, this everyone knows this, but this is a signalized entrance that exists off of Route 1. And as I mentioned, the 60-foot collector street standard is the standard that's set forth in Rehoboth's code. And along here, and this is updated from even the plans that Mr. Schenko commented on. There was a comment that in his report about there being a sidewalk on, I'll call it the Hardee's side, although I know it's not there anymore, but on that side of the entrance, and there actually is enough room for there to be a sidewalk on that side of the property as well. And so what you can see on the screens shows that there would be sidewalks there. So the entrance would be reworked slightly with sidewalks on both sides for pedestrian interconnectivity. And that leads back to that boulevard-style road that we were talking about. The folks at Pannoni put together an illustrative cross-section of what that would look like. And you can see that the total width, when you get into the community past the initial entrance, is actually 64 feet. And that includes two 20-foot travel lanes on either side of that 10-foot median that you see in the middle. And then on the outside of that, what's proposed is a 2-foot rolled curb on either side of those travel lanes. And outside of that, 5-foot sidewalks, and then, of course, street trees that you saw on the rendering of the subdivision plan. As I alluded to at the very beginning, that landscape median serves more function than just providing an attractive amenity for this area. In addition to that, it includes stormwater measurements. The stormwater would be directed to this site in the middle of those two travel lanes, where it would be filtered and then ultimately make its way through the various stormwater management or stormwater pipes that ultimately leads to Silver Lake. In addition to this roadway, of course, there's the roadway that goes off from this roadway. That is a minor street. Again, that's a new roadway on this plan, and that meets the city's minor street standards. Both of those roadways end with a cul-de-sac that has a 40-foot radius, as is required within the city's code. The utilities stayed largely the same. There's been some refinement and meetings that occurred to confirm them. So this slide is slightly refined from what you saw in June. The water connection point, actually almost all the connection points are where the red dot is located, red circle is located at the rear of the site. There's a connection that'll be made from Scarborough Avenue Extended for water, for stormwater management. As I just mentioned, the stormwater will go from that median into the easement that already exists through Scarborough Avenue Extended and ultimately be in Silver Lake as the discharge location for that. One thing that doesn't exist presently on the site that with respect to stormwater, and we talked about this a little bit in June, but currently that stormwater is not treated in any way. Whatever rainfall comes, that water goes into the storm drains and ends up going directly into Silver Lake through the various easements that I just referenced a moment ago. With respect to this plan, modern stormwater management requires approval through the Sussex Conservation District, and as part of that, there will now be treatment of water, and it'll occur in the median that exists between those two travel lanes. So the stormwater, for the first time probably in the history of this property, will be treated before it flows through all the various storm sewers and ends up in Silver Lake. With respect to sewer, there is a gravity connection that ultimately leads to the Newbold Square pump station. That is the same as was presented to you in June. One of the other benefits, we've talked about a number of benefits with respect to pervious area that exists, and we mentioned this at the first portion of this preliminary review hearing, but the landscaping that would be added to this, what's being proposed by the applicant, would result in 2.3 acres of tree canopy that would be added to this site at full maturity. And of course, currently, there is basically no tree canopy that would exist on this property. Again, it's another benefit of the redevelopment of this property as a proposed single-family subdivision. A couple of the concerns, I know that you all would have reviewed Mr. Schenko's report, and he took his report from the last time and then color-coded various sections of it with green and blue and red items. One of the items that was in that report that he was still in red, and an item that the applicant needed to address was that the lot 16, which is at the rear of the site, here at the very back side of the site where that box just appeared a moment ago. In the supplemental, the package of materials and what Mr. Schenko submitted, there was a question about had there been other efforts made to somehow realign that lot or have it somehow be configured because of the easements that exist for all the utilities, water, sewer, and storm sewer that go through that lot. In looking at it, one of the other items that was added to the supplemental materials was a survey that showed how every one of the lots, the proposed 33 lots, complies with Section 270-22, which is the city's minimum lot dimensions. As you're familiar with, there are 3 requirements. You have to have 50 feet of frontage on a public street, a minimum area of 5,000 square feet, and the lot must contain a rectangle of 4,000 square feet with the shortest side being 48 feet. There was an exhibit filed that showed that, and that's referenced in Mr. Schenko's report. And the concern that was referenced, as I mentioned, is that with the easement that exists along between lot 16 and 17, that it influences, where the buildable envelope would be. In looking at that, and if you were to look at the plans very closely and blow them up on a screen, you would see that the buildable area of that lot 16 has a width of 32 feet. And that 32-foot width is obviously very similar to if you had just a 50-foot by 100-foot lot. The side yard setbacks would be total 16 feet, with the shortest side being 6 feet, as you're familiar. So while there is somewhat, I would call it an optical illusion on lot 16 because of its length, that it may not be as convenient to build a house on, it's actually very similar to just a standard 50 by 100 lot, with a width of that building envelope being 32 feet instead of 34 feet in your standard 50-foot section. In addition, lot 16 is a lot that is 8,604 square feet in size, so there's certainly ample opportunity for a custom home to be placed within the building envelope for that lot. One of the second concerns that was referenced, and this arose during the preliminary hearing, and then it was reflected, of course, in Mr. Schenko's comments and in the chairman's letter. There was a concern about what the restrictive covenants might look like. There was discussion as to restricting future uses on the property so that the fact that it's zoned commercial, there wouldn't be a mixture of commercial and residential within the community itself. Within the package of materials was a draft of the set of restrictive covenants for the site. One of Mr. Schenko's comments in response to that was that the restrictive covenant specifically excluded lot 33, which is the lot right at the entrance. That lot was specifically excluded from the restriction against commercial uses on that property. And that was done purposefully for 2 primary reasons. First, obviously, because of its proximity to Route 1, it was thought that that's still a location where commercial uses would be appropriate and may exist. Obviously, immediately adjacent to it on the north side is a service station already that's clearly a very commercial use. And on the other side of the entrance, there have been a number of commercial uses of that property, and that likely will continue. The other item that I would say is the land planning tools from both the city and Sussex County. We mentioned the boundary with Sussex County that exists at the south side of this property. All would indicate what good land planning would indicate, which is that commercial should be along a major roadway like Route 1, and then behind that you would have residential uses. If we go back and look at the zoning map that we looked at very briefly early on, you can see that Sussex County continues that pattern, the Sussex County area being just south of this property. The red along Route 1 is actually just 200 feet back from the right-of-way line is the county's C1 General Commercial District, which basically allows all types of business and commercial uses. And as you all are familiar, there are many business and commercial uses that exist immediately adjacent to Route 1. The yellow area that you see behind that first 200 feet is a residential district in the county's medium-density residential district, the MR district. And so in looking at that, that was the reason that Lot 33 was specifically excluded from the prohibition would be in existence for all of the other lots 1 through 32 with respect to commercial activities. In addition, future property owners would, of course, be made aware of that When a person buys a piece of real property, of course, there are seller's disclosures that are required to be made, which include notice of restrictive covenants that exist for the piece of property. And so a future property owner would know that Lot 33 is excluded from the prohibition on Lot 33, as would the owner of Lot 32, who would arguably be the most impacted if someone undertook a commercial activity on Lot 33. The other item that Mr. Schenko's memo noted regarding the restrictive covenants was it sought for an agreement that the prohibition on commercial activities that I just discussed for lots 1 through 32 that would be a permanent restriction that was not a restriction that could be modified even through a unanimous vote, for instance, of the future owners within the Oceanside Reserve community. The applicant does not object to that suggestion from Mr. Schenko. And at the very outset of my presentation, I mentioned that there was a number of meetings with the city and a number of activities that occurred. One of those activities was undertaken by Cape Communities LLC, which was a public outreach. All of the adjacent property owners were contacted and invited to participate in either a virtual meeting or a meeting on site that occurred last Friday in the parking lot of Ocean Bay Mart. Many neighbors utilized that and participated in that meeting and commented on the site plan, or the subdivision plan rather, and provided feedback. And one of the items of feedback that they provided aligned exactly with Mr. Schenko's comments in that letter, and Mr. Reed told those property owners that prohibition or restriction against commercial use would be tied to the property and not be something that could be amended in the future by a vote of the property owners, making that a permanent use restriction for lots 1 through 32. In addition, just so that those folks who participated in that process, there was 3 other things that Mr. Reed indicated, and this way I'll put them on the record. So he's obligated not just because of the written correspondence he had, but because of what's being placed on the record. The owners wanted to make certain that the lot that exists on the south side that is owned by the same owner, or was owned by the same owner as the Ocean Bay Mart owner, would not be utilized as any type of construction access, for instance, during demolition, and basically a prohibition on access to Terrace Road for any purpose arising from the redevelopment of the Ocean Bay Mart site. And Mr. Reed is willing to agree to that. He's not contracted to purchase that property, and so other than trying to get some permission from the owner, he could not do so anyway, but he has agreed not to seek permission to do that and be able to access Terrace Road. There will be no access to Terrace Road as part of this project. In addition to that, and it was proffered initially by Mr. Reed, but there would be confirmation in the restrictive covenants that the setbacks for these lots would be identical to the R1 setbacks. So this property is zoned commercial, and so there is some difference, 5-foot difference essentially between that. But Mr. Reed would agree in these documents, the restrictive covenants, to honor the R1 setbacks and R1 height limit that is applicable to those things. The 4th agreement that Mr. Reed made with them is to restrict rentals within this property to a 30-day minimum. And so there would be a prohibition on any rental shorter than 30 days within the set of restrictive covenants. And our proposal would, with regards to all of those various amendments, would be that when this moves forward for final plan approval, that we would submit the updated restrictive covenants that would include those 4 items that Mr. Reed agreed to with the property owners, again, one of which agrees with the comment that was heard in Mr. Schenko's letter. That's a sort of the update of everything that has occurred basically on Oceanside Reserve from June through today. Certainly myself and the rest of the team here are happy to answer any questions that members of the Planning Commission or staff may have.
Any members of the commission?
Go ahead. Well, mine might be long. Do you have a quick question?
That's okay.
Okay. I have a couple of quick ones. First, is there a builder tie-in here, or are the lots going to be sold, and then any builder can, or how's that going to work?
That's not known yet. I mean, I can let Mr. Reed address that and answer that question directly.
Okay.
Good afternoon. Joseph Reed with Cape Communities. That hasn't been determined yet. At this point, we would just be selling lots. I was asked at the meeting, there is a home builder, Capstone Homes, that I am involved in, but definitely has not been
But the plan would be
determined
to
yet.
sell the lots?
The plan would be to sell lots
Okay.
and let people select their own custom builder.
Okay. That's good to know, actually. First of all, I think this is a wonderful plan. It's certainly much, much better than the previous one. And I can tell from the time we met in June to today, a lot has been done with the plan to bring it into compliance and to address Corey's concerns. I also appreciate the fact that the neighbors are concerned about it having residential requirements, and that you've said that it will have R1 setback and height limit. So to clarify one thing, on the new plan, it has the front setbacks are 10 feet for commercial and 15 for residential, but the 15 is only showing on the current plan on the front. So the plan is to revise that to also have it on the rear, is that correct?
The plan will be, yes, to match the R1
Match that,
standards.
okay. But what I don't think even the public understands is there's a very big difference between what can be built on C1 and what can be built on R1. So if you'll bear with me for just a minute. The R1 is the single-family district, and it's designed primarily for single-family detached dwellings on lots of at least 5,000 square feet. The C1 district, which is this one, is designed to include commercial areas where the uses are not restricted as to floor space size. But permitted on the C1 lot is a Tier 1 use. Tier 1 is a less intensive use of C1 to permit a residential structure, but it is not the same as R1. In two respects, it is the same, the height and the side setbacks. And the developer has already said he's going to make the rear and front setbacks. However, the FAR in Tier 1 is limited to 0.6, which is actually the same as R1, except R1 does it only for the first 5,000 square feet. And you heard the developer say the average size is 7,900 square feet. In R1, a 7,900 square foot lot would be limited to less FAR because of its size. It would be, the calculation would be on the first 5,000 square feet and then a lower number for any after that. If it has a basement, it would be limited further. If it has a pool, it would be limited. If it has a basement and a pool, it's limited even more. So, for example, and it's also the lot coverage requirements are different. The natural area requirements are different. So all of the lots in Oceanside Reserve are over 5,000 square feet. Half of them are over 7,500 square feet. And given the FAR calculations, some of those lots would be permitted to be larger than any house allowed in the entire city of Rehoboth Beach. Okay, the largest size. For example, a lot of about 7,200 square feet would allow a 4,300 square foot house, but in R1 only 3,600. And on the biggest example is that 11,973 square foot lot, so nearly a 12,000 square foot lot, would accommodate, by our commercial code, a 7,200 square foot house. But such a house would not be allowed anywhere else in the city of Rehoboth, including R1S, which are lots of 34,000 square feet. So lots in Rehoboth that are 3 times the size only allow for a house of 6,000 square feet. This one could be 71. So I think the residential restrictions have to go beyond the setback and height to include all of these other provisions so that it matches what is expected for R1. Is that doable?
I'm happy to answer that. Or you?
Yeah, well, I would like to, if I could, I'd like to point out one thing. I'm
Okay.
Hold the
assuming what you're saying
microphone
is-
closer,
Yes.
please.
I'm sure what you're saying is correct, but I haven't researched that in the code. I didn't realize there's a difference with maximum lot coverages and the FAR. But I would say, I was sitting there as I was listening to it, first of all the lots that adjoin on Terrace Road are not in the city limits of
No, I understand
Rehoboth,
that.
so they're not subject to any FAR regulations.
Right.
So they could build those same houses you're talking about, I believe.
Oh,
And then on Scarborough Avenue Extended, those lots are, I think they probably average 10,000 square feet. So they also, just in fairness, to compare it to your typical 50 by 100 lot anywhere in Rehoboth, when the neighboring communities are not subject, would not be limited to your typical 3,000 square foot house or 2,500 square foot house if you do a pool.
On Terrace Road, that's true, but I'm really glad you brought up Scarborough Extended. Because what this means is that a lot on Scarborough Extended that directly backs up to one of the lots of your development would be much more limited in what they could do. Much more limited. Again, depending on if they had a basement, a pool, whatever. And I'm concerned about it for two reasons. One, it's a fairness issue. I mean, people go to a lot of trouble, even on lots that are bigger than 5,000 square feet. People in this town find it extremely challenging to design a house. And I don't think that the residences of Oceanside Reserve should get a buy for that. I mean, obviously the best possibility is to rezone it, but we don't have to talk about that right now. But it also means if the city should rezone it in the future, which they have done in other cases, if the city should rezone it in the future, then all those people who built those bigger houses would have a rude awakening if they ever wanted to do anything with it. If they ever wanted to renovate, if they wanted to add something, they would be told, oh, nope, the zoning doesn't. So there's a disconnect there unless the exact provisions are built into the plan. I will point out that in the last 30 years, there have been two prior major subdivisions. Those were both rezoned. St. Michael's Place and Oak Grove were rezoned partly in order to provide an assurance to both the city and the current homeowners, as well as the homeowners who were buying lots, to have an assurance of what is to come.
I did want to add one other thing. That our deed restrictions were also requiring a garage, which that also eats into the FAR, but it isn't structure. I think probably what you're concerned about, we were doing it because the lots were large enough that it would allow it under the 60% FAR, and also would give people a place to store their bikes, beach toys, all of that. But I've lived in Rehoboth since 1965, and since the FAR has changed to its current FAR, I haven't seen on a 50 by 100 lot, I can't remember the last time I saw a garage constructed.
A friend of mine around the corner just put one in, but the lot's a little larger than 5,000. It may not be as much as 7,500, but sure. I mean, those are all factors.
Right.
Those are all factors, but the fact remains that it's not to say that for all the homeowners to believe it's going to be R1, it's really not R1. It's a residential structure on a commercial lot.
Which is not unique in the city of Rehoboth Beach. There are instances along Rehoboth Avenue where there are, and Lake Avenue, where there are commercial zonings with residential homes that exist on them, but that have all of the same features that you described in your opening comments on that. And so it's just, again, a residential use, as you noted, is a permitted use in the C1 district. And what the applicant has proffered, even though there's no requirement for the applicant to proffer it, is that lots 1 through 32 would be limited to residential uses and in perpetuity as a permanent standard for that. And so with respect to the size of the structure and the FAR, those are choices that a property owner gets to make. They get to buy a property. They can choose one that's in the R1 district. They can choose one that's in the commercial district. And that sets the parameters for that. And even when there is commercial construction or commercial zoning and residential, the code recognizes that circumstances and has requirements and such as far as buffering and setbacks that exist. If it's commercial to commercial, there's one set of standards and rules. If it's commercial to residential, then there's another set of standard and rules. So the code, not only is it a permitted use, but the code actually takes into account that those situations may exist and has different rules of the road for those circumstances.
I think those are mostly for one-offs. I don't know that the code was written to contemplate that an entire 7 acres would be, or an entire subdivision. Like I say, the history of the subdivisions is that they reflect the zoning of the use. But what I hear you saying is you don't have a problem with a 7,200 square foot house in your development. That's fine. It's nice to know that.
Does the city not have a maximum, you could own the whole block, is it not a maximum of a 4,500 square feet?
In
under FAR?
R1, it's 4,500, correct? Yeah.
Yeah, well,
But it wouldn't apply.
I might shoot myself in the foot here, but it might be easier to change the ordinance than go through. The concerning, quite frankly, with the rezoning, I was asked that at the meeting with the neighbors, is timing, because my understanding is you'd have to go, I mean.
That's in the letters, yes.
And I have a contract that doesn't allow me years and years to get this approved. I either got to get, I don't want to get into the specifics, but I got slightly over another year to get through this all the agency approvals to find all of that.
Right.
So to go through a rezoning, I think is going to add at least a year to the process. I don't see it. No?
Well, I don't think it has to.
I was understanding you had to go to, they couldn't be done simultaneously. You had to go to Plus.
It can be done.
Get the state planning office involved, all of that. Maybe if you're saying, which I'm gonna have to research, that there's a difference in the FAR for the R1 uses.
Well, Corey can correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay, then, but maybe that's something that the planning commission or the city commissioners want to look at in their ordinance to say, if you're going to do an R1 use in a commercial zone, not only do you meet the R1 setbacks, you meet the R1 FAR.
Do I understand that you don't object? You wouldn't go to the city council and object to that rezoning? I mean, because I understand that if you take away the issue of time, I understand your question about time. It makes sense. I share Commissioner Gay's sort of skepticism that it would take that long. So if it could be done, simultaneously, it could simply go forward in that way that you suggested.
Thoughts? I mean, how to answer that? How long it takes?
Well, I mean, it does take a fairly substantial amount of time. The comprehensive development plan, the future land use map would have to be modified in addition to the change of zone application. Those things, those processes and items all take time. And I said this in June, I know I'm repeating myself, but that seems unnecessary when single-family homes are permitted use within the existing district. If there was a conflict, if the zoning on this piece of property did not allow for residential structures or homes, then absolutely, you'd have to, if you wanted to do a residential subdivision, you'd have to go through all those steps and follow through this process. But it's allowed, it's a permitted use.
No, I understand.
And so
I understand, but
it seems like it's adding a number of hurdles and steps and time to the process for something that is already allowed and permitted as a matter of right.
It protects the neighbors, it protects the owners in perpetuity. In a way that, I mean, even I don't want to get in, I don't have specific questions about the covenants right now, but in reading them, I do notice that the developer can change the plans. I mean, it's a C1 lot. You could decide, you could build 5 houses and then decide over on here on another part of the lot, you might want to just do a hotel instead. I mean, I don't think you're going to do that, mind you. But
that ignores that the developer's already committed publicly to that being a permanent restriction, so that couldn't occur.
Please, go ahead. I'm done. I just wanted to raise those. There's a lot of gaps in what.
Yeah, first of all, I want to say conceptually, as a land use planner and engineer, conceptually your plan is, look, we haven't gone into the details yet, even though you just spent a lot of time explaining it. to make sure it's code compliant at the detail level. It's a terrific plan conceptually. I don't think there's any question about that. But the larger issue is the comments are made that, well, it would take more time, I hate to say this, to do it the right way. It's going to take time anyway. And before I get into that, what you just described, some changes that are different than the plan set we have from 10 days ago that we received, that you've now updated it additionally as well, is that correct?
The only change was a sidewalk. That's the only change.
Okay. I think conceptually, all the things that you want to do are very good, and you're doing a lot of creative things from a green perspective, which I think are extremely very good. But I share my two associates' concern for the long term and the impact within the city, because although I'm an engineer and not a lawyer, but there's an old joke about Delaware lawyers that if you placed them end to end, they couldn't reach a conclusion. And what concerns me is, and you made the comment earlier, that it would take time if this were to be rezoned. But the fact is, the fact that you have contracts that you indicate you're going to indicate that restricts what the owner can do, lawyers will challenge that from now until the cows come home. And it's much more solid if it is zoned appropriately, which has constraints that are put on it from the city. And what you're proposing right now is, I keep looking at this, and I've looked at it over and over. And again, I'm speaking as an engineer and not as a lawyer. But it seems that this is a situation where every other citizen who currently in confines of Rehoboth Beach that owns a property that's designated with an R becomes disenfranchised if this were to be produced. And in legal terms, it seems to be a question of equitable estoppel from my perspective and on behalf of every citizen who owns our property that had to abide by a certain number of rules. And yet with this approach, it's only limited by what the contractor says you can or cannot do. And I find that extremely, extremely concerning. And that's the one negative that, quite frankly, would have to, unless I receive more information from everyone concerned, I would have to vote against this. And yet there's so many other things in here that are so good. But it is truly a vexing problem that I have not yet been convinced that it can proceed if you don't change the zoning request.
Under what you just said, though, all the owners of lots that are currently zoned commercial, they all have the ability to do this exact same thing. No one, you're only disenfranchised by buying your choice of buying a property. There's no estoppel or other legal facility that changes that.
Every other owner of an R property cannot do what's being done here, that's being limited only by your contractual terms.
Agreed, but that's just the nature of a property you buy. That exists throughout the city, and it's just a matter of a zoning classification and what the city has established rules and guidelines.
Right, but I agree with you, but that zoning has explicit requirements that must be met, and if you elect to alter that, you have to go to the Board of Adjustment. Here, you're going out of the starting gate with a whole different set of conditions that no other person that bought property in Rehoboth Beach under the designation of an R designation. There's a gigantic difference here, and that's what's concerning. And I appreciate your assessment.
And I think one of the things Mr. Hart is saying is that if someone, these properties on Lake that are bought in the commercial district, that they knew what they were buying and they built to code. But also because they built a house in a commercial district, they had to be aware that a restaurant could go in next door to them or in the future or something. So yes, they do have the right to build a house there, but citywide, those things are, as I said earlier, those are kind of one-offs. There's a few here and a few there. We're talking about a 33-lot subdivision. That's a different ballgame, in my mind.
A different ball.
Could I ask a question?
Yes, Mr. Stockdale.
I understand fully, what's in play here. The thing that is difficult, I think, for some of my colleagues is when we met before, we spoke to you about pursuing a change in zoning to convert to residential. And you said for a number of reasons you did not want to do that. I think the reasons related to time, as you've said today, but also I think you explained that, you have permitted uses involved here, and so you really would not prefer to do that. You would prefer to take advantage of what's permitted now under the code. And that's what took us down the road of considering restrictive covenants, okay? So I have some questions about those covenants, but before we get to those questions, I want to ask you, there are two ways you could address this. One, that the city could change the code, I guess. But would you be willing, as part of your covenants, to explore a restriction on the size of the residential units? It's just a question. I'm not saying you should, but that would allow you to find your own comfort level. It would allow the public to understand what is going to be put on the property, and it would mitigate or obviate your concern about timing because it would be within your control. So that's a question. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but the other reason, one more thing. The other reason I raise this is I'm going to ask you one or two questions about the covenants because, I wonder if there could be some adjustments made in the language in the covenants that would help a little bit too with some of the things that I'm worried about. So I'll get to that next, but back to my question in terms of the size of the house, because we are, trying to take into account, the code, what it requires, what kind of development fits within the community and the community development plan. And we're trying to balance a number of things and really keep a good proposal on track if that's possible. In other words, I'm not raising this question because I want to put the brakes on what's clearly a good plan. I'm just trying to say, do we need to chase ourselves in a circle needlessly?
I think it's a factor for consideration, but that impacts a number of things. For instance, the requirement for a garage, if that were to come into place, probably goes away. And so there's a number of give and take items there. And that's why, in addition to not wanting to answering it being put on the spot right now, it's a much more involved question than what you just raised. And so we'd have to look at the standards and such, and then, for instance, take away a garage requirement or something like that. Because as Mr. Reed indicated, it's why you don't see garages typically in Rehoboth is because of that. So there's a number of factors like that that would be considered.
I understand that, but I want to be clear on this.
Microphone.
Yeah, I want to be clear on this. You know, I refer to the size of the house, but, you know, there are different requirements, open space, we talked about all of that. I agree, and that's why I said I'm not trying to back you into a corner now, but it does seem to me that it might be possible for you to look at your plan, to take into account what you want to do, what makes sense, and where you might make some trade-offs. And I say that and raise that not from the standpoint of hard and fast code compliance, because I understand your argument about, these restrictions do not now attach. But I am
And it is a
thinking.
code-compliant plan.
Yes, but I am thinking about the CDP. I am thinking about architectural massing. I am thinking about, how the development fits with the overall community. And so, again, I'm not trying to be antagonistic. I'm not trying to back you in a corner, and I'm not trying to say this is a bad plan. I'm just trying to say, is there a sweet spot here that you could maybe consider quickly finding?
I just want to say two thoughts I had while sitting there. One, we haven't even given thought to like size of houses. So, and obviously, just to make it clear, the plan is not to, because I seem to remember from the previous plan, opposition to like big rental houses. The plan obviously is not to do that, or we wouldn't have volunteered a 30-day minimum rental restriction. So the plan is not to, there's no agenda to build 6-bedroom houses and do weekly rentals. So that's already been taken off the table. And then the other thought I had as I'm sitting there is it sounds like maybe would you be more comfortable if they were 5,000 square foot lots? Would that solve the problem?
No.
No?
Well, I mean,
Or-
I don't,
May I say something, please? It seems to me that where this discussion is leading would be a provision in the covenants that would require all development of these lots to conform in every way to all provisions in the code that regarding lots and dwellings in the R1 zone. Right now, the covenants simply require setbacks and heights in the R1 zone to be applied to the development. But what Susan was saying is that there are so many other requirements in the R1 zone that at least as the covenants are drafted right now, this development will not be subject to. But it would be a relatively easy fix to make all development subject to all the restrictions, all the provisions of the R1 zone. And then I have a question about timing before we get to covenants.
Yeah. I mean, and to just add to what Commissioner Stockton was saying, we have, in addition to being satisfied that the plan is code compliant, a number of other considerations, a number of other factors that we are told by the statute to consider. I think we're circling around what could be an agreement here, along the lines of what Commissioner Davis just suggested. Now, I realize it would require other trade-offs and other plans, so I don't think anybody expects you to say off the top of your head X, Y, whatever, but our goal is to get to a place where this, Rehoboth is a small town. This is a major addition, to our town, 32 new houses. And to ensure for purposes of the factors in the code and equity factors in terms of, how the subdivision, matches up with the rest of the town, that that everyone is getting sort of roughly the, sort of the same the same rules as, as my colleagues have talked about in terms of fairness for people both who would build now and for people who would build later. So, so I would hope that we could, agree to sort of consider, and try to be creative about something, that doesn't require a zoning change. I mean, it would be, obviously, a zoning change could be pursued, and I understand your issues about timing, but it would be probably to everybody's benefit and more efficient in terms of cost to do it in this way.
My question as to timing, because that's what Commissioner Hunter was just talking about, and it is a question. Rezoning is a matter for the Board of Commissioners to address and resolve. Site plan review, subdivision plan review is for the Planning Commission to address and resolve. Is there any reason, and this is a question with all the number of lawyers in the room, is there any reason why a zoning application could not be processed by the Board of Commissioners separately, but at the same time that the subdivision plan was undergoing review by the Planning Commission? Rezoning does not involve a site plan or subdivision plan requirement. You are simply putting the property in a different zone with all of that zone's requirements, limitations, et cetera. There's no requirement that there be a site plan approved either before, after, during. Similarly, there's no requirement for subdivision plans to be approved. It's just rezoning. The Planning Commission, the Board of Commissioners can request that the Planning Commission review and make a recommendation as to rezoning, but we don't have any code responsibility for rezonings. Meanwhile, we do obviously have a code responsibility to review and approve a subdivision plan. And I don't know any reason myself why those two processes couldn't occur at the same time, particularly since there seems to be, everybody seems to like this plan, and the major problem with it seems to be this whole issue of the zoning being C1 versus R1. And so I think there would be an enormous amount of support for the Board of Commissioners. I don't want to predict this, but that there would be substantial support for the rezoning. Meanwhile, we could be dealing with the details of the subdivision plan.
All right. You're not required to answer, sir.
Well, I wasn't directing this specifically to Mr. Hutt. Just as I say, there are other lawyers in the room, not the least of whom is the city solicitor. And so I'm wondering, and we have lawyers on this commission, and so it's a question for everybody to consider.
Well, I'll filibuster for them for a moment, and note that I don't know, and I don't represent City of Rehoboth. They have attorneys, or the Planning Commission, they have attorneys that are present here. I don't know of a prohibition on simultaneous applications. It's up to what a person, the expense that they want to undertake and the risk they want to undertake on those various things as they work through a process. And so, if someone wants to take the chance on something, and again, this would likely be very consistent with R1, so I understand that process. What I would also say is an applicant has to balance that additional expense and time against the fact that the Planning Commission has in front of it a code-compliant plan. And so this is a code-compliant plan under the Rehoboth Beach Zoning Code, and even the other items that the applicant has volunteered to undertake in this matter through the meeting with various individuals in the community, the surrounding property owners and such, those meetings and what has been voluntarily proffered by the applicant that impinge on the code-compliant plan that the commission sees in front of it are voluntary. And when conditions move too far from the code, again, I'm not Mr. Larson, the Rehoboth Beach city solicitor who's sitting here are happy to answer this, but the courts have been pretty clear, and even recently, resident Judge Karsnitz, who I know the city's familiar with, issued a decision about conditions when you have essentially a code-compliant plan that's in front. And so those are the considerations that the applicant has to balance as far as filing a simultaneous zoning application with a subdivision plan when they've already incurred the time and expense of developing a code-compliant plan through that process. And as I indicated, and Mr. Reed has indicated, as we move forward from this, we're certainly going to look at all the various things that have been suggested by members of the Planning Commission about home size and those types of things and how they might impact the restrictive covenants that were being proffered and any further changes in addition to the ones from the public. And I guess my last thought as I finish my filibuster, hopefully I've given enough time for council, but my last thought on that is the outpouring of community support for the plan you see on the screen right now is impressive. As the commission is painfully aware, I believe, the last plan that went through had the opposite impact.
But I assume that same community support would outpour for a zoning request. And I don't see what the time, much less the expense or risk, are that you're talking about.
Yeah. I mean,
Sorry,
yeah.
Joe Reed again. I do have to say one thing because this has all caught me a little off guard, so I'm processing it still. But, and just in full disclosure, there is a problem with the contract. I mean, in that the seller would have to agree to that. And I'm not very optimistic, the seller, because that's not a condition. I have certain conditions, obligations, conditions precedent to settlement that I have to, that I can pursue, and then I have to settle. But getting a rezoning was not one of them, and that part of that is because it wasn't contemplated that it was needed, because your zoning code, clearly says under C1, as a matter of right, you can do any use. It's kind of, as David said, I think circular, like it says anything in R2, and then I think you have to go to R2, and it says any use permitted in R1, but the net effect is it's clear on that. So yeah, that could be a real issue, and that's not your problem, it's my problem, but I'm not sure the seller would agree to that, because frankly, if I'm the seller and I agree to that, and then the plan isn't approved, then all of a sudden I don't have my 8-acre commercial parcel anymore, and my options are limited, because right now he's got a commercial property that is by right, he can do commercial or residential on.
Okay, well, I would point out that the purpose of today's meeting, which is a continuation of the preliminary review of this subdivision application, would be hope for the commission to decide whether to continue this again for further consideration and input by you and the public, or is it to, or another option would be for the planning commission to vote to move it to public hearing. So I think that decision is important. While I fully understand the questions that have been asked and they're seeking some type of middle ground with you, that is at least what's before us today. And
Well, Chair, can I ask a process question? I'd like to hear from Corey, first of all.
We'll hear from
because
Corey and we'll hear
I
from
think
the
we're pretty
public.
far, I think the plans are pretty far along in terms of what everybody wants to see, that's for sure. And Corey's report details some loose ends, and I also want to hear from you about the process, how there's a preliminary approval, and then they go away to get their agency approval, and then it comes back to us for final approval. We have not, this body has not been through a major subdivision process before here, so I would like to hear about that, because I think that will factor into other timing issues.
all right. Mr. Schenko, are you ready to present, sir?
Sure. And first, congratulations on your reappointments.
Yes, sir.
I would like to start out by commending the applicant. They have worked with the city in good faith and have kept in communication with us and have been doing their best to work with us as well as with the other departments. I don't want to read my report verbatim. It's fairly substantial. There are some elements that we did color code them that we would like them to revise, but as stated in the conclusion, and I'll just kind of paraphrase a little bit of that conclusion. Based on the revised comments provided here, Building and Licensing recommends that the Planning Commission consider moving this application forward, provided the applicant agrees. I know that they discussed the Lot 33. That is a recommendation of ours. I believe the applicant made some good comments today about the corridor along Route 1 and how that fits with existing land use. Revised the covenant to prevent any modification to Article 6, which was in their restricted covenants. They've agreed to do that today, which is the use restrictions. And satisfy the Planning Commission's determination of the accessibility of Lot 16 in light of the constraining easement. There are many different types of easements in Rehoboth Beach. The more difficult ones, and these were raised with Public Works, water, wastewater, are the ones that aren't typically paved. They are overgrown, trees are in the way, and if they have to access that easement for any reason, it's very difficult to get through. What our main concern was, one was if this was the most applicable design that they came up with, had they considered other alternatives, and that, and David spoke to this, that the 30-foot wide easement on Lot 16 in the far right there, that they could build a house and build permanent structures, not necessarily a driveway per se, something like that, that would not affect the city's ability to access that easement, because there's going to be a lot of connections in that lot there, which might facilitate the need for the city employees to go out there at any time to service. So we just asked that in future iterations of the covenants that they have language about that easement and that access. I underlined in bold black here in the report, this is on page 9, just something I wanted to read into the record. There's been a lot of talk today about the restricted covenants, and one of the items that I put in this report is that the Building and Licensing Department of the City of Rehoboth Beach does not and will not interpret, enforce, or impose penalties for violations of private covenants, deeds, and agreements. We see this in school view. In my time here looking at residential plans, different areas have different setbacks that can occur from either deed restrictions or HOAs. And when they come in for a plan review, we don't go by those. So if it meets the requirements of a C1, Tier 1 use, there's 5 total items that we typically look for in zoning-wise when it comes to houses. You have lot area versus, lot coverage versus natural area. You have building setbacks, building elevations, floor area ratio, and off-street parking. Those are the 5 main ones that we look for. C1, Tier 1, no difference between off-street parking and no difference between building elevations. There are some differences that were pointed out to you today between building setbacks, between floor area ratio, and lot coverage. All lots have to have 50% minimum natural area. C1, Tier 1, you can cover up to 50% structural lot coverage. R1, R2 is 40%. So there's a 10% difference. And then there is the 10-foot versus 15-foot rear yard setback, and floor area ratio is 0.6 across the board versus the R1 or R2 districts have other restrictions. So we would just point that out. If I just want to read this into the record too, if the applicant did go for a rezoning, the checklist, the preliminary land use services plus checklist would require a plus review for it. Item 5 are applications for rezoning if not in compliance with the local jurisdiction's comprehensive plan. This would be a change in our comprehensive plan, so it would require that. But as I stated before, I'll just end with, we don't see any requirements for that. We do recommend that, but it is the position of the Building and License Department that it could move forward from preliminary review. Also included in the embedment, I was asked to provide a major subdivision review process with an emphasis on public street dedication and external coordination. That's embedded in the agenda today. There are a total of 11 steps. We are in step 3 right now, preliminary planning commission review. After this, if it were to get preliminary review, we'd move into outside agency coordination and approvals. Once all of those, no objection letters and outside approvals and other work between the city and the applicant based off of your requirements, our comments as well were met, they would have a submission of final documentation and all those certifications. We would then receive them, review them for compliance and completeness, and if they were satisfactory to the city, we would then inform the Planning Commission to let you know. They would be embedded for your review. Final Planning Commission public hearing and approval would happen next for 236-12F. After that, should they have, if all the requirements have been met, the Planning Commission grants final approval and signs the record plan. Copies of the approved plan are then transmitted to the Building and Licensing Department and the applicant for recordation. After that, we'd move to the Board of Commissioners acceptance. After Planning Commission approval, the Board of Commissioners would hold a publicly noticed meeting to formally accept any public right-of-way or easement dedications by resolution. And this is where the streets would be shown, but we would need a recorded plat or a final plat as approved by the Planning Commission for that to occur. That showed all of those right-of-ways, the easements, the dedications, in conjunction with whatever right-of-way or easements that DelDOT would impose on them on the entrance. They would then hold the public meeting. Once approved by the Board of Commissioners, the dedication would become official and the proposed street would be incorporated in the city's public streets system under Chapter 232. Then we've moved to recordation. The developer must record the approved subdivision plat with the Sussex County Recorder of Deeds within 90 days of the Planning Commission's approval, unless extended for good cause. Recorded copies are distributed to those in the city. Then we'd move to the other processes, the performance guarantee and required improvements from 236-15. I can go into more detail with that. After we'd begin any of the construction and inspection phases, and then we'd wrap it up with the post-construction acceptance and maintenance. And so that's it's embedded. There's more information there, but that's what we would like to see. All of the items that are shown on the plat. Right now, it's the sketch plat until you approve it per our 236 code. It would need to show all of the easements, all of the dedications. We'd look at street names and addressing that would be on the applicant to coordinate with us, and Sussex County addressing. Again, that goes in with outside agency approval. This is in between preliminary and final.
Okay, so all that would be done after preliminary approval and before final?
Correct, and these steps are taken very closely with how the county as well works their subdivision plans.
Do you have an estimation of how long that would take? I think you said 4 or 5 months, maybe?
I'm not sure. I mean, they'd have to coordinate with obviously with DelDOT, Fire Marshal, Sussex Conservation District, NREC, with the city, with our departments, but at a minimum, several months.
Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Strange.
Yes, Corey, thank you for doing that. It reminded me of a couple things. Under 23630, under item 20, one of our obligations is, it says, other public health, safety, and welfare concerns. And we are required to make things, incommensurable things, commensurable, and it's a real challenge sometimes. You can't say yes or no just because you don't like it. That gets thrown out. The court doesn't like that. But I think the questions I raised earlier with regard to equity, I'm still extremely concerned about. And in light of what you just said, it emphasizes even more under welfare is in fact disenfranchising people because of what you would allow in another area under C1. And even though some of it's, quote, permitted, it's only permitted within the context of item 20. And it really is vexing me. And I haven't heard a concrete answer one way or the other so far. And that really bothers me. Thank you.
Mr. Shinko, I had previously talked about how the process would work its way through, and you have very kindly outlined how that would work. If the applicant, after attending today's hearing and hearing the comments of the Planning Commission, decided to reach certain agreements about issues of what was raised here, or residential application of residential requirements and whatnot, there would be an opportunity for that to happen if this matter was voted. I'm asking a lot of if. But if this matter was moved forward from preliminary review to public hearing, would that provide an opportunity for those things to come to you and be considered and reviewed and made a decision about whatever their accommodation turned out to be?
What I would like, if that would be the case, is a letter that would summarize what was discussed today, some of the recommendations and/or requirements that were provided, so that we could, the applicant as well, and myself would be able to ensure that all of those were met in the in the interim between the preliminary and then before, because we would do the exact same process when they would come back for a resubmission. One, check it for completeness, and then check it for compliance, and also that would mean the conditions and what they came with on record today saying that they would do.
If I could jump in on the procedural piece. Yes, so for the commissioners, if you did vote to move it forward, we would provide a letter to the applicant raising kind of these outstanding issues that we wanted to take a closer look at. It would have these other reviews that Mr. Shinko has identified with DelDOT and the other outside agencies, that could require other tweaks to the plan. And then that a final plan with those pieces of information from the outside entities and their further consideration of the additional issues you raised is what would come for a final vote to you. So today isn't the last sort of bite at the apple. You all would have a chance to sort of put those issues back in their camp to work out as they go through the outside agency piece, and then they'd come back to you.
Mr. Larson, aren't there so many issues that have been raised that affect the plan, the covenants, and so forth, that to put out a notice of public hearing when there's so many unresolved questions and issues, how's the public supposed to respond and know what they're coming to testify about?
Well, I mean, whether to move forward or not is a decision for you all, and I'm just laying out the procedure. I do think that that revised plan would be part of the public notice. So, I mean, we're talking about a hearing months out. So I think there would be plenty of time for the public to have access to that information. But again, whether we proceed now to a final review that won't be for a few months, or have a continued preliminary hearing, that's your decision.
Mr. Chair, if I may. The concern that I raise is a simple one. At present, the plan is code compliant, and with the issues that Mr. Shinko has raised, those would be the only issues to discuss at present. He would not be in a position to discuss with them questions related to if it were rezoned to R1, because it isn't at the moment, and that is not before him. So moving this forward allows for state agencies and the appropriate approvals from outside entities and outside agencies to be provided. In addition, it allows the applicant the opportunity to consider whether or not timing of rezoning, if rezoning is even in their minds. And presently, there is no requirement that it is. It is for you all to suggest if that's the appropriate word. But I would be very hesitant if you didn't move this forward, what would be left for the city to look at? Because there wouldn't be anything remaining as to seek resolution on, because the issues that Mr. Shinko has raised are the ones that are relevant at present.
May I ask a question about
Mr.
that?
Stockdale, go ahead.
One of the things that I've sort of been struggling with here, and it may be because I don't have some of the vast experience and tenure on this commission that others do, but in terms of perhaps moving this forward to a vote today, the questions I ask you about the equities here, one of the things I was struggling with is how the covenants fit into this whole equation, okay? And an example of that would be, and I'm not implying anything about what I would do or how I would vote, but for instance, in the covenant, there is a section that says plan of development. And as I read that covenant, it says as long as the developer owns a lot, he can make any improvements that he wishes, okay? Now, I had two minor issues there. The word improvements is sort of a subjective term, and when we talk about whether we have a code-compliant plan here, I understand your position about permitted uses and code compliance. But I'm wondering about a provision like that. Is the real verbiage there intended to say he can make improvements that are in accord with applicable law and regulatory requirements or something? Because it reads, and the city is implicated in these covenants, it reads like the developer has carte blanche to do whatever he wants on the property. And part of your argument here is, we would only do what's permitted under the code. So, can you fine-tune that language, for instance, because it does bear on some arguments here. People can't have it both ways. I understand they're tough decisions.
I'm happy to address.
I'd like to follow up on that for just a minute, please.
I have another one, too.
Under the covenant, sections 2.2.1 states that so long as the developer owns any lot within the subdivision, it has the right to make changes to any or all lots it owns, including changing the location of the boundaries of its lots. The developer under 2.2.2 also has the right, as well as anybody it would sell these rights to, as successor or assigns, has the right to plan, design, develop, construct, maintain, and manage, as they deem appropriate for its purposes, those lots and the common area, including without limitation the right to change the number, the shape, the size, and the location of any unsold lots and homes to be built. Now that is a loophole, I think, that you could drive a truck through. And so the idea that we need to go to public hearing, and I'm not necessarily opposed to that, but I don't think we should do anything without taking a long, hard look at these covenants, because if there's not going to be any rezoning, and if the developer will not put into those covenants a provision that says that any development on those lots has to conform to all requirements, restrictions, et cetera, from the R1 zone, then these covenants are the only thing that's going to protect other lot owners and the immediate neighbors. And the covenants then become terribly important for anybody who has any interest in this. So we're not just sending to public hearing a plan, but the major part of the major concern, since everybody likes the plan, including me, the real concern is that we're not, if this is not rezoned, then the covenants are the only thing that stand between the city of Rehoboth Beach, the adjacent neighborhood, and the adjacent neighbors and the other lot owners from having some very unpleasant results that are provided for and allowable under the covenants as permanently drafted.
Sure, I'm happy to address that. And I'll start with the broader question. The first part of that question was, sort of how are these, I think the part of that question was, how are these implemented into the Planning Commission's ultimate action? And certainly Mr. Larson needs to advise you on this, but typically what the practice is the Planning Commission's role is to look for that code compliant plan. But then there are other things that, for instance, an applicant may proffer, like these restrictive covenants that we're talking about right now. And they're not things that the city could unilaterally impose, but when an applicant proffers them, they can accept them. And my anticipation would be that the city would, moving favorably on this, if it were inclined to do so, would say, this subdivision plan is approval, it's subject to, you approved a site plan earlier today where you had some, pardon the expression, but boilerplate type language about agency approvals and those types of things. And you listed a number of conditions of approval. My anticipation would be that one of the conditions of approval would be the declaration, the draft of restrictive covenants that we're discussing right now would be approved. So that's to me how it gets implemented through, that process gets implemented through, and certainly the city solicitor or Mr. Larson can correct me if I'm wrong in that extent. But with respect to the question about that language about plan of development, the comfort that you should have there is the applicant can't change a lot line without going through Mr. Schenko's office. Like those restrictive covenants don't trump the subdivision ordinance and the zoning ordinance in the city of Rehoboth Beach. What that language is for, that's somewhat very standard language in restrictive covenants. That language is intended to, if an easement needs to be adjusted while the developer is developing lots and putting those together, that they have the opportunity to modify an easement without going out and seeking 75% of each of the lot owners' approval within there, so that as things come up in construction, as they almost always inevitably do, there's a mechanism that those things can be adjusted. But if someone were to move, and we can certainly look at that language, I'm not arguing that the language is perfect, but that's the purpose of that section. But if someone tried to move a lot line or change something else substantively about that, the city wouldn't permit that. The plan of development is the plan that you approve. Hopefully it's the plan on the screen, but that's the plan of development. So if lot 28 was going to move the other way, the developer doesn't have the authority to do that without getting plan approval back through this body right here. And so again, I'll certainly look, I wrote it down, I'll certainly look at that language. And I know I don't know if those are all your questions, but you had mentioned earlier as part of the discussion that you had other questions about the restrictions, and so I don't know if there are others as well. But.
I did have one other question on the enforcement provision. I think it says the developer and the board, if I'm remembering the language right, I think it's Article 10 or Covenant 10, will have the right to devise reasonable rules about enforcement procedures. That's, my general summary of the language. Question as to why the city was not mentioned there when it was mentioned earlier.
It's the difference between, in my mind, when we had discussed this in June, the city wanted to make sure, I think, that because typically 33 lot owners in a community would be fully self-governing, and the only people who would have the ability to enforce a neighbor who was trying to operate a business would be one of the other lot owners within that. And so the discussion was that that would also impact neighbors on Scarborough Avenue Extended or Silver Lake. And so that's why the first language was added, so that there is enforcement opportunities if someone tried to do something outside of what those restrictive covenants are. The other section that I think you're referring to is the self-governance within the community. If they wanted to create a rule about, and in this context, it's difficult to know, because frankly, we've already offered the most common piece of controversy. I know there's other attorneys in the room. One of the most controversial things in HOAs throughout Sussex County is rental restrictions. It's a great place to come and visit. So rentals are always complicated and difficult. But that's been addressed, hopefully, with the neighbors with a 30-day proposal. But if there was a rule with that, maybe if you're going to lease your property, that you have to provide the homeowners association with specific information about the tenant or something. There are communities out there that have those types of regulations. But that's why the city's not mentioned in that, because the city has its rental program, but it doesn't involve itself at that level of detail where it knows who the person is in each rental, each weekend or weekday that exists. And so that, to me, is a type of rule or regulation that's internal governance of the community versus enforcement in general would be, that's where the city's mentioned, the neighboring property owners, as well as, of course, the owners within the Oceanside Reserve.
Mr. Schenko, just a point of clarification. It's your wish that the city not be part of any enforcement of these covenants, is that correct?
That would be correct. The code enforcement officers that are with building and licensing, we enforce the Rehoboth Beach Code and only the Rehoboth Beach Code. So we would not enforce private deeds, restrictions, or covenants. Correct.
I sort of have a devil's advocate question or comment based on questions that came up here and the part that Julie read about the rights of the developer to make changes at any time. You're right. It would have to come back to Corey, and it might even have to come back to us. But just as you've stood here today and said it's a code-compliant plan on C1, we would have to say that then. So the fact remains that the developer has lots of options for what to do with this, both now and after we approve it, because it's a code-compliant plan. And it would be still, you could put a restaurant on it, it would still be a code-compliant plan according to the way it is now. So that's sort of the devil's advocate thinking. However, having said that, I also take the city solicitor's point that we're to a point now where we do like the plan. There's lots in the background that still has to be done, but everybody likes the plan. There are these agency approvals that are needed. Do we allow the process, and there's nothing more we can do here, I guess, right now, because there's too many open issues and too many agency approvals still to come.
I think that's
So
right.
do we move it forward so that we can start that process, knowing full well that there's a lot more to be done?
That's the question before the commission today. And in order to keep this moving so that we finish this meeting before Seawitch starts, I would like to go to the public comments section, please.
Please. Okay.
Yes, sir, please come forward. State your name.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Larry Richardson. I live at 8 Silver Lane. Joe Philippak and I are city residents in the neighborhood known as Silver Lake Shores. And if you were to look at the city's archive and see the old Beach Walk folder, you will see our names very clearly in there, because we were very vocal opponents against the old Beach Walk proposal, which is why I am here today, because I commend the commission for raising valid concerns, but I assure you that even with those concerns, I'm doubling down on my endorsement for this development, especially after seeing the old Beach Walk plan up there. I think our worst case scenario is if Mr. Reed runs out of time.
That's right.
So strongly endorse it. Hopefully we can work something out with the R1 situation in parallel or whatever we can do. I also want to say that Mr. Reed has just been amazing to work with and really appreciate his communication and working with the neighbors. So thank you all for what you're doing. Thank you, Mr. Reed. And I love this, and hopefully we can get Ocean Reserve out there.
Thank you, sir.
Oceanside Reserve. Thank you.
Anyone else, please? Yes, sir.
Hi, my name's Lauren Friedman. I am a neighbor of Larry, and I'm very supportive. As Mr. Strange indicated, it's a terrific plan. You know, we think that that Mr. Reed has been very responsive. However, unlike Larry, who lives across the street, I live right adjacent with my wife, Patricia. I'm in lot 16, which is that large lot there. And I do share the concerns and skepticism of members of the commission, of the board. Right now, there's all of these houses have a 10-foot building restriction line. Every single one of them, except for the lot 16 and lot 15, they have a 6-foot building restriction line from our property. And, you know, maybe, so that's being labeled a side lot. It's the rear of our property. And it would be possible, I think, to build a massive house that large as Susan Gay has pointed out, that lot is so large that 6 feet from our property, there could be, you know, a massive house. So again, I commend Joe Reed and Brent Reed. They've been really great at reaching out and communicating with everyone. They've convinced a lot of neighbors with their sincerity, and I believe in their sincerity. But at the same time, you know, I wanted to express as a adjoining neighbor my concerns about what is actually going to be built. You know, I just don't have any idea what's going to be built 6 feet from my property line. And I don't know, you know, I'm sure that Mr. Reed has been very willing to work with me, and, you know, perhaps will agree to make some accommodation. You know, maybe he will change things so that instead of 6 feet, it's 10 feet, like the 31 of the 33 properties all have 10-foot building restriction lines, but right now it's 6 feet. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Thank you. My name is Nancy Rhodes, and I live on Scarborough Avenue Extension, and my property comes right up to the property in question. I took 9.5 pages of notes, and I just want to say I really, really appreciate the thought and consideration each commissioner is given to this. I applaud you, and I hope you keep it up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me, let me catch my breath. Is there a doctor in the house? Anyone else? All right, we'll close the public hearing. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, please come forward.
Yes, my name is Bonnie Hardy, and I own lots my husband and I own lots 22 and 24, to be 1024 Scarborough Avenue and 1022 Scarborough Avenue Extended. Okay, we met with Joe, I met with Joe Reed, along with other neighbors, last Friday, and I appreciate all the feedback he gave us. But I do have some concerns. What our concern is, on Scarborough Avenue, our elevation is lower than the elevation on the subject property we're talking about being developed. We have had issues with the prior owner and the people that actually rented the property and draining water onto our property. And since the elevation is higher, we do have that issue. So I just want to be put in public record that we are concerned with the stormwater management. It was overlooked when Rehoboth Auto did their development, and it was acknowledged at the meeting. So I want to put that in record that we are looking at the stormwater management plan. We want to see the plans. We want to be assured on Scarborough Avenue Extended that there are no issues with water draining onto our properties on that too. And I think Terrace Road, I don't know if they have an elevation issue. I think they're all in agreement because they're shutting down the road, the access to Terrace Road, and that's great. But I think Scarborough Avenue Extended needs to be looked at as far as this elevation issue on that. And, you know, I think the plan looks great. I think it's just we need to just get a reassurances on our concerns of stormwater management. I'd like to see the plans and maybe some topo maps also.
All right, ma'am.
On that.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Anyone else? Did I miss anyone? All right, we'll close the public hearing section of this. I think I've outlined the.
Do we want to vote on moving it forward?
That's what we're going to do.
Okay.
That's
How do you
what I'm
want
saying.
to do that?
I think I've outlined what our options are at this point, either to vote to continue this preliminary review for further consideration, a similar meeting like this, or to vote to move it forward to a public hearing. I think those are the two primary options that we have here today. And I think we've had the benefit of a lot of input from the applicant as well as the public. Do I have a motion?
Well, can I speak to that?
Absolutely.
I mean, as with everyone, I'm very appreciative of all the work that the developer here has done and the cooperation that's been shown with the area residents, which is evident from the comments. But I'm also aware that the considerations that Susan Gay did such a great job of researching and presenting to us were a surprise, probably to many people, and perhaps, you know, even the sort of detailed considerations with regard to the implications of the differences between R1 criteria and the Tier 1 allowances under C1. And we've had a lot of very good discussion, but I really feel like the most efficacious way to move forward would be not to put what we're not really sure will be the proposal for a public hearing. I mean, we have to give notice of a public hearing. And, you know, if there is consideration of, for example, changes in covenant language, which is certainly something that we've, you know, talked about, I don't know when that's going to be, you know, kind of formulated. It seems to me that taking the time now to bring it back for another discussion like this, when hopefully these issues have been resolved or, you know, accommodated, it may well be that there are people whose concerns about the development did not crystallize until they heard the discussion here, you know, that we've had. And, you know, and so those are the reasons that I would vote against going to a public hearing now. I think, and that may sound like a delay, and it is not my intent to delay, but we're talking about that in comparison, for example, with a possible process of rezoning. And in my view, given all the givens and given all the possibilities and possible considerations, that's the most efficacious way to proceed. And I also want to note that you know, this question of whether there's a code-compliant plan has a couple of other dimensions. One is it may be code-compliant today, but we don't know exactly what it might be at the time of a public hearing, and I think we ought to have something that we agree is, you know, sort of is code compliant and going to remain code compliant that goes before a public hearing. And secondly, of course, our jurisdiction, not just our jurisdiction, but our responsibility as a planning commission does go beyond simply whether a plan is code compliant. As others have pointed out, and as the court in Smoky Hollow acknowledged, there are other statutory issues like the orderly growth and development of the city and the impact on nearby properties that it's our responsibility to think about and to consider in making a decision. The decision has to be reasonable. It can't be arbitrary. I could not agree with that more. You don't want to have a planning commission that makes sort of off-the-cuff decisions in a one-off way. But the issue before us is a kind of unusual issue. It's an issue of trying to make the criteria for houses in this, what is for us a large subdivision, actually the same as what the criteria are in general throughout the city. So I understand what the code requirements are now and what the argument is about compliance. But I also think that's a different kind of context than a kind of one-off imposition. So thank you for letting me speak, but those would be the reasons that I would vote against moving forward.
Can I offer a
public-
slight
with a
alternative?
public hearing.
To see if we could have a
There's
compromise?
no motion on the floor at this point.
Okay.
So
Well,
we need to address that somewhere
okay.
along the line.
C-
But
Do you want me to make one?
Yeah.
Because I thought about a sort of measure that gets to what Nan is saying and also gets to something Julie had said, but also moves it forward. And that is that we would give it preliminary approval, not to move it to public hearing, because that wouldn't necessarily be the next step, but to move forward with all of the agency approval, just move it forward, and then return here for one last preliminary while we look at everything that has come together as a result of everything they have to do to meet Corey's requirements and to meet the other agency requirements, then move it to public hearing from there. So at least we get another bite at the apple in a preliminary stage before we move it to public, because it may be very different from what we see. The overall plan won't be very different, but there may be a number of things. So I take the point of the planning commissioners who say, we're going to go to the public. It'll be months from now, which actually makes it worse. People forget I forget what we do at these meetings. I think we need another look at it after it goes through all of the next stages of approval.
is there a second to this motion?
I didn't phrase that very well. I didn't phrase it like a motion, so somebody wants to rephrase.
If that was a motion,
I second it and would like to.
I second it.
I would like to
That's a good
echo or
approach.
support Susan and Nan's comments. There's a whole lot more to the Planning Commission subdivision review process than whether a particular subdivision plan is code compliant. And in this case, it may be code compliant with respect to the C1 zone in which that property is now zoned. But as far as I'm concerned, it's not code compliant with the zone in which it ought to be zoned. And so code compliance, I understand, I'm a lawyer, the technicalities of this, but as a practical matter, I don't think it's code compliant, not with the zone in which it ought to be zoned. And secondly, I would like to come back, I like Susan's approach, because I would like to be able to come back and see what changes the developer has made or the applicant has made with respect to not only the plan provisions themselves, but also these issues that we've talked about, which are not really collateral issues. They're very basic issues, and particularly with respect to the covenants. I mean, we have running out of time, but there are a lot of questions about the covenants that are housekeeping questions, but they ought to be raised. Is this planned community going to be subject to the Delaware Uniform Common Interest Act, DECOYA? Who owns the common area? What is the common area? There are many, many questions that have to do with governance, none of which have been discussed today, and I think all of which ought to at least come out and be on the record, and then we can all make up our minds what we think about the answers. But these are outstanding issues that if we can come back for another round and have a meeting that we can get these things before we set a public hearing. I don't think these are questions that are appropriate to be raised at a public hearing, because that's to hear from the public, not further discussion among the members of the commission.
Can I take your statement as a second?
I did second.
Okay, good.
I
Any
said
other-
I seconded, and I wanted to follow up.
Any other discussion?
Yeah, just a quick question. If we proceed down that path, how quickly can we expect to get this back before us? Because I do understand the concern about time. We're not trying to delay things, so I'm trying to crystallize
I think
the
a lot of that
schedule here.
depends on what the applicant does. And so
Exactly.
And we are saying they can move forward to get other
Yeah.
agency approval. So that would take a few months, but it shouldn't take more than that, right? Several months.
Anyone else? All right, let's vote. Roll call, please.
Oh, roll call, okay. Commissioner Strange.
Commissioner Strange?
Commissioner Strange.
in light of all the comments made, I think in all fairness, although I believe in terms philosophically of the development of what's being done, at this stage, I have to abstain.
Okay. Commissioner Ellison?
As much as I hate delay, I think that, Susan, your approach is absolutely appropriate. I think it moves the project ahead, and therefore I vote yes.
Okay, great. Commissioner Hunter?
Yes, for the reasons stated by Commissioner Ellison, I vote yes as well.
Okay, Dewey is out. Commissioner Toby?
I vote yes.
Commissioner Stockdale?
I vote yes, too. I just want to underscore, the desire to move this forward. It's a good plan, so.
Exactly. Commissioner Davis?
Yes.
And I vote yes, and I echo what Commissioner Stockdale just said, and Chair Bryan.
Chair votes aye for the reasons stated.
Okay, so we have a 7 in favor and 1 abstention.
All right. We will have another preliminary review of this application. And
Down the
Mr.
road.
Shinko, if you'll let us know when you've gotten whatever additional information is in and you feel that it's appropriate for us to look at it again. And if you don't hear anything, let us know
Will do.
that too. Let's adjourn for 5 minutes, please. See everybody back here at 20 of. 5. All right. Let's reconvene, please. It is 3:45. And we are here on the One Rehoboth matter, One Rehoboth Avenue. And Mr. Robertson, there you are. You're still Mr. Robertson.
For Commissioner Gay's benefit, my name is still Vince Robertson. I'm still with the firm of Parkowski, Girk, and Swayze.
That is reassuring.
To me as well. So with your permission, can I go ahead and get started? All right.
Please get going.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to run through a bit of explanation why we're here today. It is a minor revision to the site plan that you all approved a while back. This is our cover sheet to the presentation. It's hopefully not going to be a long presentation. But one of the things I just want to reiterate is what you see on the screen is unchanged completely by this minor site plan review. So everything that's there that we showed you before and that was approved as part of the site plan and that you see on the screen is going to remain the same. Just real quick, you'll remember that everybody that's involved in this, I just do want to introduce everybody who's here. From the Onyx Group, we have Steve Silver, Jonathan Silver, and Chris Berg, who are all sitting around to my right. We have Adam Webster from Grottos, of course myself, Wally Funk from Noor Architectural. We have Jim Baker from Pilot Town Engineering, Greg Rochelle from Panoni, Megan McDonough from GTA, and then Dave Grayson from GGA Construction. Sort of just a quick progress report on what's happened so far and why we're here. Since the last site plan approval, our development team has maintained constant communication with Corey, with Evan and Taylor. And there's been a lot of coordination that's been involved, not only with the demolitions, but also with the site itself, including up to really the present time in terms of the city reaching out to the development team to hold off on tearing some things down so we could get through Sea-Witch. So as you'll recall, there was a Sirocco Hotel and there was a Grottos on the corner. That was demolished after the previous approval of the site plan. And there was some things that, and particularly the Sirocco, there were some things that couldn't be determined until that came down. But before all that happened, I want to take a step back, and before we actually came to you all for site plan approval, one of the first things we did was meet and see what was available on the adjacent Admiral Hotel, and particularly the Admiral Hotel addition. Then when we came to the site plan process, I will call it, you'll recall that there were some representatives of the Admiral Hotel who spoke about concerns about their property. And one of the things that we wanted to do was look at the city's files with regard to the plans that are on file with regard to the Admiral. We did that, and Mr. Felici, who's here today, was also present for that. So because I don't think they had plans for what their hotel showed. One of the things that we found is that those plans were building permit plans. They're not as-built plans. That's one thing. And the plans are only for the hotel, not the garage and pool deck addition. The city doesn't, apparently for whatever reason, have plans on file for the garage and pool deck addition, which is next to our property. The hotel itself has a shallow foundation that does appear on those building permit plans, but we really don't know what kind of foundation exists on the pool deck portion, which is next to our property line. So the demolition of the Sirocco and Grottos occurred. There was some exploratory work that was done, which we'll get to in a moment, that revealed that the Admiral Garage may also have a shallow foundation similar to the hotel. Frankly, we don't know exactly what kind of foundation it has, but that's just the assumption. There was outreach that was attempted with the Admiral. What our design team wanted to do was some non-invasive subsurface explorations to determine what type of foundation existed for the support columns for the Admiral, their location, the type, the materials used, that sort of thing. But for whatever reason, the Admiral did not, and their team did not allow that to occur. So we were sort of stuck at that point. There was another FOIA request that our team did with the city. The first one was me as a lawyer, not as an engineer, an architect, or anything else. And rightfully so, they probably didn't trust my work in that regard. And so they did their own FOIA review of the files and also looked at files of adjacent properties just to see if anything was misfiled in the city's records that would reveal additional plans. And the same thing resulted. There's, again, the city's files were reviewed for the Admiral itself, the hotel, showing that shallow foundation. Again, no files for the garage and pool deck. So as a result of all that, our design team asked for this minor amendment to be proactive. And the reason being is that, as a practical matter, we don't want to get into excavation and sheeting and shoring, those sorts of things, and run into a problem. And then have to come back to you and do this process in the midst of construction. And so by being proactive, and we'll explain this, pulled those western boundaries back away from the Admiral further than they were, so that there's greater separation between the two and whatever may exist with regard to the Admiral's foundation. So we feel that's a much better approach. In doing that, that results in a redesign of the underground parking. It does not change the at-grade entrances to the hotel in any way. So everything that you all approved that you see from Baltimore Avenue, whether that's the entrances, with one minor exception, or the loading zones, that's all the same as what you approved before. I'll show it on the plans, but I'm going to just say it right now. There's a question in Mr. Shinko's report about the transformer and where that went and why it's not there anymore, because that was near the entrance, if you'll recall. That was because Delmarva Power just decided they don't want it there, which we all kind of had a laugh, because if you ever ask Delmarva Power to do anything, it takes an act of God in Congress to get it done. On the other hand, they proactively decided that they don't want it there. I don't know if they're going to co-locate somewhere else or whatever. So we don't have a transformer on our property, which is why it's not shown anywhere, because it's no longer on our property. So this next picture just sort of visually gives you an idea of what we're talking about. Obviously, this is our property from the boardwalk looking west towards the eastern side of the Admiral. And you know, these are the foundations. Over here is Grotto, in the back is where the Sirocco was. And I'm using the pointer. Yeah, you can see it on the screens. This deck up here is cantilevered over the side, but there's support columns that are virtually right on the property line here behind this dumpster. And then there's two more to the south, to the left in that picture that don't show up in this picture. That's what we're speaking about in particular. I mean, there's foundations and things with regard to the garage here, but it's mainly these support columns. And again, there's just no plans for what type of foundation exists there. So the thought was, let's pull the whole thing in towards our property to mitigate any issues. I'm not going to go through these, but just to show we looked at them and got copies of them. These are the Admiral Foundation drawings that are in the city's files. And it shows footing details, but again, this is just for the hotel. You can actually, I think, make out like hotel rooms up here. But, you know, and again, these aren't even as-built, so we don't know what currently exists there. This is only what was going to be built for the building permit purposes. And this is just another page of those foundation drawings, again, for the hotel itself, not the addition that's nearest our property line. And so with that, I'd like Megan to come forward, hopefully. Breaking it? Maybe not.
How about I go to the left?
Yeah, there you go. All right, we'll just switch. Megan, if you would, just give your credentials and...
Hi, Megan McDonough from Geotechnology Associates. I'm a registered professional engineer in the state of Delaware. Okay. So this is our next slide. As you know, preliminarily, we had performed some standard penetration test borings and some cone penetrometer soundings when we first came before you when we presented those results. So we wanted to do additional exploration, and what we did was excavate a bunch of test pits along the property boundary, specifically adjacent to the three building columns that were pointed out before. Our hope was that we would find the edge of the foundation. When you look at the structure, the columns are precast. So you can tell by the beveled edges and kind of the concrete that it's precast. And it should, for all intents and purposes, either rest or bear on a conventional shallow foundation or a pile cap. And the pile cap or the shallow foundation would typically be cast in place. So there's usually a connection that gets bolted and or welded, and then those connection points get grouted. So we were hoping to see the edge of those by excavating from our property. Additionally, the way in typical construction, you have a concentric load. So if you have a shallow foundation and it's either rectangular or square, usually the load comes down in the center of it. Sometimes on property boundaries, you have what's called an eccentric load, and the load comes down and it's flush with the edge of the foundation. So we were trying to find out for our purposes whether we were dealing with that eccentric loading condition or the concentric loading condition. Quite possibly, we were concerned that if it was a concentric load, that foundation would be on over the property line, and that happens on adjacent lot lines sometimes. So we excavated down, and as you can see, we cut a square in the foundation that was, or the slab that was remnant, and we exposed the foundation wall from our previous structure, and then what that yellow arrow is pointing to is a shallow foundation. And we were hopeful that that was the foundation we were looking for, but it's actually the foundation associated with the below-grade masonry wall from the structure that got raised. So in the center picture, you can see that we've dug like at the lot line adjacent to one of the precast columns I had previously discussed, and you can kind of see where the connection would be. We're thinking that's a concrete collar instead of the grout that gets packed in at the connection points. So it's hard to tell if that's either a concrete collar that got cast or it is the actual shallow foundation, or if it's just another cast in place pedestal that goes down. So, and then you can see from the next picture, you know, we're seeing again where that potential connection could be, but it's not clear and apparent.
If you could just real quick with the mouse, just describe what you're talking
I'm
about.
sorry, I didn't realize the mouse was there. Is that clear? So here is, it's hard to pick up in this picture, but this is the edge of the concrete for our shallow foundation. This is the below-grade masonry wall that will eventually be demolished, but this block bears on a shallow foundation, and that concrete is considered the projection. Usually with foundation walls, you know, you have it, the footing is always, not always, but typically wider than the load that it's supporting. This is the precast column. You can see the beveled edges, and then you can kind of see this is, you can't tell where the precast ends and the cast in place starts. It's kind of not clear. So we're assuming that this is a concrete collar that got cast, but we don't really know. We can't make any definitive, you know, we have no sure thing. So we're still working with assumptions, which is where we're at pre-exploration. And then you could see that this is, again, just a close-up of another precast column where we're not clear if this is a concrete collar or potential foundation that may come over across the property line.
Just wait, don't go anywhere. So,
oh.
Yeah, that's just the next slide. It's just to orient everybody.
Yeah, sorry. So this is an existing conditions plan with some topography. You could see that this is where, when the design team was discussing how we were going to field verify the dimensions of some of these foundations and compare them to any plans that might be in the file. So the dashed lines are where we performed the test pit explorations or attempted to perform the test pit explorations. This was our assumption about the footings that the precast columns came down on. Again, in this picture, we show them as being eccentrically loaded. So we assumed based off of just making some assumptions about the load and looking at the spacing from the ground level of the precast columns within the garage at grade parking area, that they were lightly loaded, even though it's 2 stories, and that we were assuming maybe minimum 5x5 footing. So if they were eccentrically loaded, like they're shown here, then the precast column comes down at that location. And as you could see, if it's completely on their property, then we would need to expose all along our property line to get the actual dimensions. And right now, we're not able to do that. And if they were concentrically loaded, then the cast in place column would fall center. And it could either act in that manner, or if you kind of drag that square down, it would be in the center of it, which means maybe there could be possibly footing projection across the property line.
Thank you. So the next slide, and I'm going to ask Wally to come up here for this one, is the plan submitted in September of 2025. And I know Mr. Shinko had some comments on that, which we're going to address in a moment. And this is actually the lower level. So Wally, if you want to introduce yourself and give your credentials again real quick.
Yeah, Wally Funk, architect with Nor Architects out of Chicago.
Just real quick, the X's on here, those reflect the columns that Megan just talked about.
Right here. Yeah, so following the discussions with the columns and the exploration that was done and some of the, basically the unknowns that came out of that, the team was tasked with trying to find a way to mitigate that, risk that happens next to that excavation, to try to gain some more separation from those columns, from the Admiral as a whole along the west side, actually along the entire west lot line. So as we looked at this, obviously it comes with two things, right? If we could make the footprint smaller, and also if we could reduce the depth of the garage, it'd be a great benefit to, getting away from that lot line, reducing that exposure there. So what we did was we went back, we looked at the design again. We're actually able to pull the lot or the garage 5 feet, a little bit more than 5 feet to the east off of the Admiral lot line, and then approximately 18 feet at the panhandle is what I'm calling it here, at the west lot line. And then we're able to get a few more feet actually at the other areas too. So to do that, we obviously reduce the footprint. And the big thing with that as well is we're proposing a single level garage, and to maintain our parking count, we are adding parking lifts to enable stacked parking down in the garage. And with that, it would be a valet parking only operation instead of a self-park. So with that, we were able to reduce our footprint, reduce the depth of the garage to a single level, reduce the overall depth by 5 or 6 feet. It also reduces foundation sizes and so forth. So it really mitigates the impact of the entire excavation.
And just for the record, all the parking spaces, including the lift spaces, are 162 square feet and 9
Correct.
by 18.
Yeah, correct. 9 by 18 for all the spaces, lift and on grade. And we've got a mix of on grade and lifts, so we have a good mix for the parking requirements.
And just because it's on this slide, it shows some cars queued in there. I know Mr. Berg's going to talk about that, but how many cars can be queued within the garage on estimate if we ever needed to, if we're at max capacity?
I mean, so right now we're showing, you can see here in our queuing sort of. Yeah, exactly. So right now we're showing here, 5 queued cars here. These could actually feasibly go around here and up the ramp. There's at least another maybe 6 or 7 cars that could be queued without even getting up to where we've got our first floor entry area.
Can you show the entry area? Put the cursor on the entry area again?
We did it reverse. We did the lower level. We're going to go to the next slide.
Okay.
So, yeah, go ahead.
So, oh wait.
It's one more.
Yeah, is there one more? Whoops. Where's this one? There we go, that's it.
We'll do it. Yeah,
we can do this one first, yeah. So essentially this plan, as you see it here, the entry drive is exactly the same as we had on the approved plan previously. The loading area shown here, 12 by 48, is exactly like it was shown previously. And then the only change here is that we added a passenger loading area right at the entrance here next to the lobby, just for ease of access, accessibility-wise and so forth. Other than that, everything else on this first floor for the retail and so forth stays the same as it was previously approved.
And that's where that transformer was.
Correct. And the transformer was here. Actually, what we understand that power company is going to do is take the existing transformers that fed this entire site and consolidate it. So it's not on our site. There's an existing one there now. That's where they're replacing it. As far as we know.
So,
Let's use the microphones.
So the question was where they're going to relocate the transformer. Again, that was DP&L, and I think, I don't know if you heard Mr. Funk say that it sounds like they want to consolidate all of the transformers that served all these different properties into one. And frankly, they probably have the right to do that under their utility franchise easement with the city. So, but that's where that is. So I know we're jumping around a little bit. We just showed you the plans that were submitted in September for the first floor with the entry and then the bottom floor that's been revised. We got comments from Mr. Shinko about pedestrian aisles and things like that. And what we've done is, it's really a fairly minor revision. So Wally, if you just want to describe those real quick. And I'll explain how we're going to deal with those in a second in terms of procedurally, how we think would work.
Yeah, so the couple of comments, basically the main comment was regarding the passenger loading on the lower level. And Mr. Shinko had sent a letter we'd received yesterday. So actually very minor, two things were adjusted here. We actually have an additional larger passenger loading area here, which conforms to that requirement with the 5'7" wide aisle, the 8 foot by 20 foot. And it actually works out great because it's right near where we've got all our central core. And then the other thing with that, because that doesn't count as a parking space, we extended this just a little bit to sneak in another parking here. It actually still maintains approximately 14 feet relief from the garage to the property line in that panhandle area too. So that actually was not much of an impact. Those were really the two changes. So everything else as far as the layout, the lifts that were shown, everything is identical to what you saw before.
And just with regard to that, I know you all haven't seen these minor revisions, but Mr. Shinko's report addressed those one way or another, a couple different items. And I would point out, and I don't mean this to sound like criticism, it's not at all, but those were building code issues. We know we've got to comply with building code. So I think this, and we would when we submit the construction plans to Mr. Shinko. So the solution to that would be, if you all are in favor of this minor plan revision, that it be conditioned on complying with all building code requirements, because that was an IBC requirement that Mr. Shinko raised for all of that. And since we have to comply with it anyway, you know, we get it, and it'll be on the construction plans. I just want to describe, oops, you changed it. All right, if you could describe the lift system, how that works. Yeah. Jonathan.
Get back to it. Oh, wow.
Someone got
You have that other.
Yeah, I can go. Yeah. Oops. Hold on. Yeah. There we go. Yeah, because we're back on that. Okay. Sorry about that. We had to slide in that one plan based on Mr. Shinko's comments and our changes to it, so
Right, we
that
got a little-
updated things.
Oh,
last minute.
I'll run through this just real quickly. This is basically just reflecting what I just discussed with the one-level parking and how the grades are accommodated. And, you know, as we discussed before, everything from the first floor up as far as heights and footprint and floor areas are all identical to what was approved previously. And just to give you a little visual on the parking lift system, it's a very standard system used in a lot of urban areas throughout the country. Basically a platform, a two-stack. It can accommodate different heights of cars. The nice feature about these sorts of things is that we can actually tandem 2 or 3 together using a combined mechanism. So, you know, it's a very simple system. You know, it has fail-safes on it and so forth if any issues occur with the mechanism. So it's something that we've experienced. We're actually working on another project in Nashville with the same system right now.
Are you aware of any issues with it, or failures or problems in operation?
No, like I said, it's you know, it's got fail-safes that are related to it. You can obviously manually get a car down if there were a mechanical issue, but they're very simple. They actually don't have much of an electrical draw to them either, which is sort of surprising. So.
Thank you, Wally. With that, if we could go to Mr. Berg, and Chris, if you could say who you are and what your credentials are.
Christopher Berg, Vice President of Operations for Onyx Hospitality. And as Wally said, we're going to be employing a strictly valet program with this presentation. And this allows us several benefits. One, to control the flow of traffic and the ultimate destination of the cars. But it also allows us better safety as well. by taking control of the vehicles in the garage. So when someone approaches the hotel, they're going to be met by someone at the ground level, and that person will guide them down the ramp through, obviously hand directions, but signage and lighted guideways as well, and will be greeted on the lower level by the person that they'll actually make the exchange with the keys. They'll, as was pointed out earlier, we'll have a location for the unloading, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know if you want to go into that one first or here, but just kind of giving you an idea, again, with the X's, this identifies sort of a queuing pattern. Again, taking control of the parking is going to allow us a better opportunity to control the queuing and pulling all of that traffic off of Baltimore Avenue from the start.
And just talk quickly about how that's also managed with your reservation system and your communications.
Sure. I mean, obviously, this would be disclosed before the person even books the reservation with us. So this would be described on our website through all of the third-party intermediaries like Booking.com, Expedia, and of course over the telephone. This may influence a buying decision. This may not be an amenity that someone is interested in, but we want to be forthright, with what our intentions are with respect to their parking. Yeah, so, yep.
Yeah, so it's all going to be with text services?
Oh,
and
yeah,
everything?
absolutely.
Yeah.
So once they're in-house, we're, actually, day of arrival, I should mention that too. We use a text messaging system at all of our properties. It's a system called Kipsu. So we send pre-arrival messages, and as part of that pre-arrival message, we would remind them about, sort of what this process looks like, give them direction before they arrive at the property. And then that same text messaging system would be utilized throughout the stay if they needed to call for the car at any time during the stay or at the point in time which they depart.
Thank you. Chris? So before I get to this next slide, one of the things that we received, and I don't know if everybody in the Planning Commission received, but I know the Planning Commission's attorney received, was a letter from Mr. Carey, who's here this afternoon, and I saw Mr. Moore and Mr. Felici is here as well. I just wanted to address a couple things in that letter that they raised proactively, because I imagine they're going to want to speak this afternoon. And just the first concern they raise is about whether there's an appreciable adverse impact on their property, which is to the west of ours. As we hope you've seen from our geotechnical experts, that this is actually going to have a positive impact on their property because we're proactively pulling the line back to actually further protect their property and avoid any unknown consequences once we start doing excavation. They also talk about that it does not decrease the minimum specified yards and open spaces or minimum or maximum parking spaces and loading spaces. We've actually increased the yard space on the west side of our property, which is adjacent to theirs. And it keeps the same number of spaces, and the loading space is unchanged to what you previously approved. We actually add that one where the transformer was. They do talk about Section 270-30 in the terms of affords ingress and egress for a motor vehicle without requiring another motor vehicle to be moved. I understand that's in regard to the lift system. However, that doesn't really apply to, it doesn't apply at all to internal parking spaces. When you look at that code provision, that is designed to prevent somebody having to move a car out onto a city street or alley to get another car out. Here, we have total unobstructed access to and from Baltimore Avenue. As you saw, we can load in about 12 cars inside. The lift system has nothing to do with ingress and egress onto Baltimore Avenue. They talk about, again, adverse impact on adjoining or nearby properties. We talked about that. They also raise a concern about traffic backing up on Baltimore Avenue. Again, Wally explained that we have plenty of room for cars to queue internally in the parking garage. And frankly, that's really no different than the prior plan that you all approved. It's the same number of spaces, same number of rooms. But I would also sort of point out that the information that they provided doesn't support that claim. They attached an activity report that's in 3-hour increments. And in looking at it, the worst one was one car every 5 minutes at worst, and that was one time throughout the 5 months they looked at. The next worst was one car every 7 minutes, but most often it's one car every half hour, so that hardly supports a claim from experience that there's going to be traffic backup based on their own data at our hotel, and their hotel's larger than ours. They mentioned the transformer and the loading area. Again, the loading areas that were approved are unchanged and the transformer just got moved. That doesn't have any impact on our site at all. It's gone. I think that's actually an improvement. It's something that we don't have to work around. And then Wally talked about the lift system and their concerns about that. So, really, I don't think there's any support for the claims that were raised in their letter. The whole thing with this from the start, when we first started doing this at the preliminary reviews, Mr. Felici was here and talked about, making sure that we protect the Admiral property. That's what's driving this whole thing. We tried to find information out about the Admiral property from the city's records. We tried to do it through exploration on our site. We tried to do it through exploration on their site, and they didn't allow that. So what we did unilaterally was pulled our subsurface walls foundation back so that we wouldn't have any impact on them. It just strikes me that to say we shouldn't do this is actually adverse to their own property and their own interests. With that, I'm going to conclude. I'm sure you're all happy to hear that. With a couple of points about this. There's some real benefits to this. As we talked about, there's increased separation between the properties, and it proactively enhances safety and minimizes risk. There is a shallower excavation depth between the adjacent foundations, which reduces construction risk. There's, again, added safety for both current operations and any future development of either property, including the Admiral's property. As Wally testified, the valve-only lift system is something that's widely used in the United States, and it ensures controlled safety for vehicles and pedestrians. This will direct drop-offs into the garage, which reduces on-street congestion, actually, because it's totally controlled and improves overall traffic flow on Baltimore Avenue. That's sort of an ancillary benefit to this, because the main benefit, again, is the structural concerns we had. And another ancillary benefit is that it improves the impact on the environment, because we don't have to go down so far. And because we don't have to go down so far, then there's going to be less construction impact on Baltimore Avenue, less truck traffic hauling materials in and out when they do the excavation. So with that, again, we hope that you'll look favorably upon this. We realize that Mr. Shinko has raised some IBC issues with regard to the pedestrian loading areas in the aisles. We know we have to comply with that, but everything else is code compliant, so we hope that you'll act favorably on it with the condition, should you choose to make it compliant with the IBC requirements that Mr. Shinko stated that we know apply. Thank you, and we'll certainly make ourselves available for any questions.
All right. Any member of the commission? Yes, Mr.
I have
Strange?
quite a few questions. Yes. I don't know if anyone else just has one question or two, they might want to go first.
I have a question about your foundation wall relationship to the footers on the Admiral garage.
Well, I'm going to turn that over to one of our experts. So that's probably Wally and Megan. So if you all want to come up, or however you want to do it.
I mean, from the photographs, clearly you did a lot of exploration, but I sense that you failed to discover much of what you were hoping to see. And so your strategy was to pull your foundation wall back, which I think was a good move. But on what basis did you determine 5 feet? That's the first question. And then I have a second question associated with it. I'll give it to you now. If you had another layer of parking, would that distance between your foundation wall and the footers on the columns increase in distance?
I'm going to answer one at a time because the second question is too much for me to try and process with the first.
Okay.
Okay. So again, our thought process with the 5 feet was, even though it's a 2-story structure, when you look at the column spacing at the at-grade parking, there's only a few parking spaces between the precast columns in this area. So, when you estimate the load on one of these foundations and then back calculate using a code allowable bearing capacity, the minimum that we thought the footing would be was approximately 5 by 5 feet. So worst case scenario, if the column is concentrically loaded and not eccentrically loaded, that means if it's a 5 by 5, that 2.5 feet of that foundation may fall across the property line. We don't know. Right. So again, we're living in an assumption world. So that said, when we look at the depth of our sheeting and shoring system, which may or may not change based off of, that still has to be designed. But we looked at a couple different options, and you consider the thickness of that sheeting and shoring. So be able to allow a minimum distance between the edge of that sheeting and shoring and still have room between what we're assuming is a foundation that may or may not be 2.5 feet over the property line. Again, all assumptions.
Well, worst case, you took worst case condition.
Well, we don't know that it's worst case. It could be even worse, but we're hoping it's not. So this is, well, it's just the truth. I don't want to say it's worst case scenario. We're hopeful that that it's a non-issue. It's and that it's completely. But we want to take the appropriate precautions, as Vince said, and be proactive.
So I think pulling the wall back was a very good strategy. My second question was, does adding another layer, like your original garage plan, going down, impact the distance, the 5-foot distance in sort of your calculation? Would it be greater because of that, or would you compensate in another way?
We would compensate likely in another. I'm going to say that we would likely compensate in another way. So the other thing is, the deeper you go, you have to look at different strategies for the sheeting and shoring or the temporary excavation support. So based off of this, we've assumed that tiebacks, even though they are a temporary measure and can be de-stressed at completion of construction, the strand would remain in place, but there would be no tension on it. And in the event that they want to do something in the future, we just assumed that tiebacks were off the table. So, you are limited with those parameters on how deep you can make the excavation, because the deeper we go, then the wider potentially, if we went to a sheet pile system, a secant wall system, the wider the sheeting and shoring system is. So with this lower or just single level, we can contain the thickness of that sheeting and shoring system without the use of tiebacks.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Can you translate that for us? Please. What I thought.
Oh, I wanted to give you a mic, I'm sorry.
I have some questions.
Okay, questions.
I've got a lot of questions.
Your questions are going to be much smarter than my questions, so let's just start with mine. My concern is basically about the sort of traffic flow and, whether there's a backup and those sorts of things. So if you could just kind of walk me through this. As I understand it, when folks drive up to the hotel, there's a valet, sort of desk or something there, and is there passenger loading and so forth there at the entrance? What I think I understood was that same driver stays in car and drives it into the building. Is that correct?
Yeah, so there would be signage, like Mr. Berg said, here at the entrance. And we always talked about there being signage to get people off Baltimore Avenue, so that would be the same. There would also be an attendant there that would direct people to, just to make sure that's clear, down this ramp, and this is Baltimore Avenue over here, down this ramp, just like before. Then they come in and turn down here, which goes to this level. Where I lost my mouse, and brings you over to here. And we showed just examples of cars queuing here, 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 and here. And then the valet stand is right here. And that's where, because that's on the center core of the building, that's where they're going to hand over their keys. There's also going to be, the unloading of, your stuff, baggage, luggage, that sort of thing, up through the elevators. And then the valet attendants would take it from there.
So I spent a bunch of years living in New York where there are lifts all over the place, right? So that's very familiar to me. My concern is it seems to me that it might be a personnel issue. In other words, how quickly at your most sort of active times, how quickly these cars, so we'll get down there, that's, you know, that sort of is what it is. And then the speed is going to be, since most of your spaces are lift spaces, you know, using those mechanical devices, right? So that's going to add, you know, add time to the time it takes to park a car, let's say. So just a few questions about that. Is the idea that this process is going to be outsourced to like a valet specialty company, or will it be your own staff, or?
No, this would be our own staff. It's not our intention to outsource this.
Okay.
And to your question about, you know, is one person going to be sufficient? No, we're going to have an idea of what our occupancy is, and if we're having a heavier check-in day or heavier check-out day, and we would staff accordingly for that.
I don't, you know, I don't know if there are any industry, you know, the industry of this kind of parking device, sort of best practices about, you know, the timing, how many staff it takes. I guess what it translates into in terms of getting reassured that this change to the lift system doesn't have any sort of spillback effect that would translate into a backup that would impact. Actually, one of our conditions was fully accessible to fire and other emergency vehicles, and just generally the traffic situation there on Baltimore. How would that, are there some standards that are already kind of set up in the industry that provide for that, I guess, is maybe one question.
Well, I'm going to let Chris answer that, but I'm going to refer to the Admiral's information that they provided, because I think that gives us a realistic look at what happens at a hotel that's right next door on this block. And looking at their information, one of their highest days was July 3rd of this year. And in case anybody's wondering, the weather was clear in their report. And there was 6 cars per hour from 3 to 6 p.m., you know? So that's obviously, everybody realizes that's a really big day, you know? So I understand there's a concern there, but I think from data that's been provided, it's not that, you know, everybody's coming all at once and it's going to back up. And as we said, we have the ability to yeah, it actually works out in better control than, you know, individuals driving in. But I don't know, Chris, if you have anything you want to add?
Just to kind of double down on that, yeah, it gives us more control with us employing this, you know, fully valet system. And again, it comes down to the communication with the guest, utilizing, you know, obviously face-to-face transactions, but through that KIPSU messaging as well, we can sort of understand in advance, because it's not atypical for hotels to send a post-departure text message. Hope everything was great. You know, do you have an estimated time of departure? And that would be another way to help us kind of stage the parking appropriately, stage cars appropriately.
And just so you can kind of see on this slide, we didn't show this before, but there's actually a picture. This is, and we've all stayed at hotels where they reach out to you before you get there and while you're there and everything else, and how you get your valets. So that's all through text. This is just an example how it can be customized so that they know when you're coming, what time, with instructions.
Okay, thanks. Thank you. Mike?
Mr. Strange?
Yeah, thank you. These aren't in any particular order. I didn't anticipate doing that. First of all, based on the design that you did, I mean, you've done a lot of things that were very creative initially with your design, with the dedicated outdoor air systems and the variable frequency flow and a whole bunch of stuff that's really very good. But there are a lot of things that are really concerning to me with the latest sets of drawings, because there are 3 sets of drawings and the dimensions don't match. They're all different. So I don't know which ones are the real drawings and which are the actual ones, because you've got 3 sets and they're all different. And that's, as an engineer, I can't accept that. So there has to be a set that is the real set of drawings, which I don't know what the heck they are.
Well, there's the set that was approved. They got the preliminary site plan approval, so we know there's that. There was the set that was submitted in September, which Corey reviewed, which only changes the lower level. So the dimensions down there have changed, but the upper dimensions have not.
But in fact, they did, and that's what concerns me. the changes are different on all three drawings and not just on the lower level. So I don't know which ones are right. I have no way of knowing that. The access, the height of the entrance to the garage changed. They don't match. The elevators and the steps were completely reversed on all floors, including the basement.
The last version had the, because when we changed to the single level, that dimension at the entrance to the garage actually increased. So that did change for sure. Yeah.
It did change.
Yeah.
And it's something that we missed initially because it's not code compliant, but that's another story.
We talked about that specifically. Yeah, we did actually. Yeah, that was the one going right into the main entrance.
Right.
Yeah.
But as Corey pointed out, in terms of allowing maneuverability for a truck, most trucks are 12 to 13 feet tall. You don't have that. And that's, that came out of the blue, and that's something we missed on the initial drawings, but now it's back again.
We did discuss that for sure. We we did.
I mean, that was something we worked with staff on, and we discussed that, yeah. I mean, so I don't really have a good answer for that because it was approved, but it was all out in the open when it was approved with Mr. Schinko's review of it too. Right. So.
But now,
I can wait for my turn.
okay. All right, good. All right. The valet parking. There's several levels on the valet parking which are problematic. And it gets into a bunch of specific details. But with regard to the handicapped, even with a valet program under federal code, you have to have a drop-off area that's separate and distinct for their use. And I didn't see that on the drawings.
So we actually, let me get back to that. Oh, go ahead. So there were, so we have a dedicated loading, passenger loading accessible on the first floor, ground floor, right adjacent to the lobby as part of the revision. And that's shown on the drawing. Yeah, there it is. It's right there. Yeah, exactly. So it's right off the entry. So, and then in our
So
conversation.
that's the one, that's the handicap.
Okay, so there's one there. So in our discussions with Mr. Schinko and even just yesterday, and we discussed actually providing another one on the lower level. So we actually have a revised plan we did last night just to show that we can achieve that. We can show it to you right here. So we're going to, basically the upshot is we're going to install another dedicated loading zone on the lower garage level as well. So we'll have two. There you go. Yeah, that's it. So it's right in this level, or right in this area.
And that's not a lift space, right? That's
Correct, not a lift space, correct, yeah. So that's getting back to the discussion we had earlier briefly, is the way we were able to do that, we had a parking space here, we shifted it over to here, shifted this perimeter out just slightly so we can incorporate that. And to Mr. Schinko's point, we think it's a good idea, so.
So you have a drop-off area that is, meets the specification under the ADA requirement.
Correct,
That
yes.
is not, will not be used permanently, it is used for the temporary
Yes, exactly.
loading and unloading.
That's strictly loading zone, it's not a parking space, passenger
Okay,
loading.
good.
Yep.
Because
And we have two, we'll have two.
Okay, all right, that's good. The entrance to the parking garage is angled from the beginning of the entrance all the way down. There isn't a 20-foot level loading space, which is usually required under IBC code. Is that not true?
Yeah.
Before you begin the grade, you need 20 foot of level space, and that isn't on the plan.
That configuration doesn't change. It's level at the outside, then it slopes slightly, then it starts to slope down. That's unchanged from the previous plan in terms of the slopes.
So, this is an amendment to the plan, but the fact that we missed it the first time, does that mean we don't correct it the second time?
We didn't miss it. I don't agree with that characterization because we spent quite a bit of time talking about the grade of that loading area, the dimensions of it. That clearly was not something that was missed, and that part of it's not changed.
Okay, I'm not sure I agree with it, but I accept, you said what you said. Rehoboth under 270-30B requirements for egress and ingress and egress, it's 24 feet, 12 feet per travel lane. This isn't. And I guess I'm having problems with the fact that we missed that.
What's, excuse me, just on the 24-foot width dimension, is that what? Yeah, it's 24'6" at the entry, and it's 24 foot all the way down.
Well, that's it, unfortunately, but if you look at that 24.6, it shows some of that is overlaying on stair steps or on the sidewalk, which is angled.
That's actually not stair steps. It's a nomenclature that the other civil engineer used on his plan, and that's a copy of the lifeguard station plan.
Right.
So that's actually a
And
level.
I had to go out to look and see what the city did and when they installed the sidewalk, because I couldn't remember.
We went
It's
through that
angled.
before, though, at length. That's the city's plan, and that just shows the gradient, and I think it's like an inch. It's
not really.
Yeah, but my point is, what exists, what is there, what the city installed is angled. It is not flat. And so when you look at that, the actual distance you have is, let me find it again. It's 18 feet wide, 9 feet for travel lane, and that's not IBC code compliant under 406.4-.3. It's not flat. It's angled. That's the actual reality with what's there right now.
I don't know what to say, Mr. Strange, because that's exactly what was there when we got the prior preliminary site plan approval. We spent
Actually,
a lot of time.
When we were talking about back then, I had indicated, and in fact, the civil engineer that represented the city indicated, oh, no, this is what the sidewalk is going to look like. Here's where it's going to terminate, yada, yada, yada. And there was a vast discussion about that, and I said, it doesn't look right. I went out there and looked at what they actually did and the slope. It is sloped, and you don't have a flat driveway. It's angled. I mean, that's what the city made. Now, maybe the complaint's with the city, but that's what's there. I mean, that's the reality of what it is. Oh, I'm sorry. That's the reality of what it is. That's the as-built that the city did. And it conflicts with what it's supposed to be.
I'm butting in. One thing to note, too, is, we're just talking to Dave Grayson here. One of the things that's going to happen is we're going to have to redo that sidewalk anyway, because it's going to, collateral damage somewhat, right? So we're going to have to tear that out. We're going to have to rebuild it. It's going to have to be made right to what we needed to work. So that's essentially what's going to happen, because we have to do all the connections at that point anyway.
I agree with that, but what it turns out, what you're trying to do may conflict with what's required under the handicap rule, under the feds, for the sidewalk. I don't know that, but it's a problem.
We actually, Greg Rochelle from Panoni and I just discussed this the other day in terms of those elevations along there. And we are confident we can make that work with the accessibility on that sidewalk. And we know we've got to do some work over there as far as rebuilding that sidewalk. It's just going to happen due to the proximity of the construction.
Well, in that case, it's problematic, and Corey's going to have to deal with it to meet IVC codes, meet our codes, et cetera, et cetera. Also, one of the things, and I don't know if we didn't catch it, IBC requirements for closed underground garage for stairwells requires 55-inch clears distance and not 48 because of handicapped access. I looked at your plans and I can't tell from the plans what you have. Is it 48 or 55?
So I'm going to jump in. I mean, we're getting into real specific building code level questions. We know we have to comply with building code. We are 100% going to do that. Mr. Shinko is going to do that. He's going to send it out to the city's consultants to review that. This is a site plan review. It's zoning code compliance, not the width of openings for ADA compliance or that sort of thing. And I'm not saying we don't have to comply with it, and we fully respect that, but that's a different step than what we're here for today, with all due respect. So.
Well, it's okay. You and I know each other for a long time. You came in with a minor amendment. I looked at the minor amendment, And there were things that didn't sync. Just like, for example, I said the 3 plans have 3 different sets of dimensions on them. And when you're trying to review a plan, when the plans have different dimensions on 3 plans that purport to be the same thing, you don't know which one's right, and you're trying to find out what's correct. With regard to things that you did that were subsequent, you now went to 1 floor. Now, I know this is called a minor amendment, but that's quite a dramatic change. So what we approved is not what you're currently doing. It now has 1 less floor, and because it has 1 less floor, that then changed a whole series of other things with regard to where things were located, et cetera, under the code. So now, because it changed, and I can't tell from the drawings, the new drawings you submitted, the ones that we have, differ from the original thing that we approved. And so it made it very hard for me, from an engineering standpoint, to make determinations. So that's where all this is coming from and why these questions are being asked. Also, just simple things, like in the examples of the lifts that you described that you might be using, I looked at them, and the first thing that hit me was I didn't know if one of the drawings was AI generated or it was an actual drawing of a lift. The reason being is, and I don't know if you have it in your set, you didn't show that one. The car is shown where the vertical supports are for the lift structure are directly in front of the passenger and the driver doors. So if a valet got in and actually drove it back and the lift went up, he can't get out, or he can't get in at either
Obviously,
stage.
the
So it
lift's
looks
gonna be
silly.
accessible though, so.
But the point is, that's what you gave me to look at, and it's like, that's impossible. So it was a concern. I mean, that's your documentation that I had to look at.
Mr. Strange, can I interject something here, please, sir? We're going to run out of time and gas. And from what I'm hearing, I think that I anticipate a motion to continue this matter to a future date. We have people from the public here. I'd like to hear from them today before we adjourn.
In that case, then, I'd like to ask one specific question with regard to the loading and unloading. And you've talked in generalities as to how it's going to work, and you talked to the fact that you may have to have additional staff during peak hours and how to do it. And that basically involved what's called queuing analysis. And I did a queuing analysis, and based on the standard time related to the lifts that you have, there's various manufacturers, but essentially the lift takes 40 to 70 seconds in general for either loading it on or off to get to the second one down. And when you do a queuing analysis, the service 60 vehicles, some of which will go directly into a space, some of which will have to go into the lift. In the worst case, the service time for 60 vehicles goes to 4 hours. And that's based on actual scientific queuing theory.
Well, I'm going to point out something for the record. None of that is in the record. We don't have an expert. We don't have any details about that. So,
But I have a letter that says it's going to operate efficiently and not have an impact on anything.
Well, I agree with that, but to say that it won't operate efficiently is not based on anything that we have in the record. The second thing is we do have information. Well, let me back up. We have common sense that 60 rooms are not going to show up all at the same time.
I took that into account. I'm doing statistical analysis based on data, not the data that was submitted by the adjacent property owner.
And I'm just saying, and we can ask the attorneys, we can't have something in the record, statistical analysis, that's not, you can't base your decision on something that's not part of the legal record. I don't know what that analysis was. I don't know what it was based upon. That's not something that's part of the legal record of these proceedings.
All right. Mr. Shinko, do you have anything to add at this point, or would you like to defer to a future meeting if one is scheduled?
Excuse me, the only thing I would like to point out is in the report, I do list all the outside agencies. It's list likely external approvals. I have all my comments. I would rather, if you'd like to have the public speak today, and I can speak in a bit more detail at a future.
Yes, sir.
At a future meeting.
That's great. All right. Any members from the public here? Please come forward, state your name.
think I'm good. Am I on?
Yes, sir.
On the microphone. Blake Carey from the Smith firm in Rehoboth Beach. I represent the Admiral Hotel, which is right next door. We submitted a letter on October 20. I think it was put into the record on October 20.
Just so you know, Mr. Kerr, there's a 3-minute, sorry.
Sure. Thanks, Bill. Mr. Larson knows I like to talk for a very long time. But stack me together and I can come to a conclusion. That said, we have a couple concerns, couple questions. First of all, a positive impact does not alleviate a negative impact. So while we appreciate the positive impact that this has on the Admiral, it doesn't alleviate the negative potential impacts that we've addressed in the letter. Secondarily, with respect to the minor amendment itself, we would question whether it actually is a minor amendment based upon the requirements or the conditions that are required to create a minor amendment. Specifically with respect to the spaces themselves, the valet system, my understanding of the code is that for a parking spot to count as a parking spot, you cannot move another car for that to be a parking spot. This requires 62 parking spots. There are 24 lifts, I believe, in this scenario. So whether or not those 24 lifts really account for 2 spots or just one, I think is a question for the commission or for the attorneys. Secondarily, we've addressed the other impacts that we're concerned with, which is another requirement of a minor amendment, that there be no adverse impact to neighboring properties, not only to us, but the other neighboring properties on Baltimore Avenue. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Well, this is part 1. Do I have a motion to go to part 2?
Yes, I move to continue the public hearing because a new plan was done last night and needs to be submitted for review by the public in advance of the next meeting.
As well as the building inspector.
Yeah, and so did you say we just do a voice vote?
Well, is there a second?
Second.
Second. Any discussion? All right, voice vote, please.
Okay, well,
Go ahead.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
All right, we'll continue this to the December meeting because we don't have enough time to
Well,
notice.
I don't know, do we? Because we don't have to do a notice if it's a continuation.
Well, this is a
do we?
continuation of a preliminary, I mean, of a public hearing, so I'm
And?
concerned that we
And
need
we'll be able to
enough
get that
time
plan
notice
to Mr. Shinko. I mean,
Yeah,
it's done, so
but
that's next
and
week.
Does it have to be renoticed? I think you should ask your attorney. Yeah, does it have to be renoticed? It does? Okay, all right.
Yes.
We'll get it on for as soon as we can, based on the notice requirement.
It'll be mid-December. That meeting is in the second Friday.
The 12th. The November one and the December one are the second Friday. So
Second Friday,
November
okay.
14th, December 12th.
Okay.
Can I ask a question of the chair and actually of our attorney? Once before, when we had complex engineering issues, I was allowed to draft a letter that our attorney reviewed and then forwarded it to the client's attorney to speed things up. Can we do that in this case as well, or would you like that?
I'm sorry, we were communicating over here. I apologize.
In previous complex cases, when we've had a lot of engineering questions, mainly from me, I drafted a letter with all those engineering questions, had our attorney review it, and then so it could be given to you, so you'd have time to look at it, and not have to wait 2 months to get hit with all these things.
Yeah, no, I'm fine with that. And I would ask for some mercy with regard to this. Obviously, we've got an important site in Rehoboth Beach that's got fences up and looks somewhat like a war zone. We'd like to get this in November. I know that Mr. Shinko's been reviewing plans. I know he wants to get this moved on as well. So we're going to do everything in our power to get this on in November. So if you have something you can share with us, if we could make sure that that happens so that you all have the information and we can get it out so the public sees it as well, and we'll hopefully be on in November.
Thank you, sir. That's what will happen then. Anything else here? We spent a lot of time together. Happy Thanksgiving. And we'll see you in December on this one, for this matter. Yeah.
It's more like Happy Halloween.
You're right.
Yep, we are adjourned.
Oh, that's it? Okay. I get to walk 5 blocks.
Hey, Mike?